Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have a special compilation for you of malicious compliance stories that you can put on while you're driving or working or even when you go to bed. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. This compilation is sponsored by my 3D printing website. Visit dangly3d.com where you can get your very own 3D printed Carmen Chameleon Karma Stories channel mascot. And yes, it comes complete with those cookies that I've been bribing you with for subscribing for years now. Check it out at dangly3d.com, link in the description of this video and podcast. Alright, on to the compilation, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Darth Valgov. Boss tried to make me work after hours without clocking in, regretted it the next day. This story is a bit of a long one and goes back to when I worked at a casino. For anyone out there that thinks it would be a great job, well, I can tell you right now, it's not as glamorous as it seems, especially when you are working in the kitchen. Now, a little backstory so you all can get the whole picture. When I started working at this location, I was young, still in college, and working 2 part-time jobs. At first, it was just okay. I'd been hired on as a steward, which is just a fancy term for a dishwasher, which wasn't too bad, as it had been the same job I had at the last restaurant I had worked at. However, there were a few differences. I won't go into too much detail and name all of them, just the ones that are important to this story. The first one, and the one I liked the best, was that since there were so many restaurants and the stewards were all in one department, we were shuffled around every day. One day you would be working in the steakhouse, the next the buffet, then the Italian, the sandwich shop in the bingo hall, and so on. This meant that you were always working with other people, interacting with them, and gave a change of scenery. I was told I was odd for liking this, but my counter was that if you did end up working with someone you didn't get along with, then it would only be a while till you worked with them again. The second was that this place hated unions. Twice a year, there would be a meeting that everyone had to attend, where they would make these long presentations on how evil and manipulative unions were. Also, there would be signs all along the employee hallways with anti-union propaganda. After working for the casino for some time, my boss approached me asking if I wanted to be bumped from part-time to full-time. I said yes, as the benefits were really good. Not only did I get medical and dental insurance, but I would also be getting access to their lawyers, as well as a few other things. I guess it was a good thing that I did because a few months later, there were some major shakeups. I didn't know what caused it, but most everyone there hated the new changes. For one thing, the sick note policy was canceled, meaning if you were sick, it wouldn't matter if you had a note from your doctor saying that you couldn't work. If you didn't show up, they docked you a point. This resulted in cooks and stewards coming in, vomiting on the floor and in the trash cans because they couldn't afford to lose a point, as it would count against them when it came time for raises. Another thing they changed was that they were cutting the number of full-time employees. I was safe, along with everyone else who had that status. But if any of us left, that slot would not be filled. There would only be 2 full-time employees per department. Speaking of departments, that leads me to the next big change. Technically, the stewarding department would be disbanded. This meant that, while our supervisors would still be there, it would be the chefs and managers of the restaurants that would be in charge of us. This also meant that we would no longer be moving around. I was sent to the steakhouse, and thankfully, I had 2 great female coworkers. In fact, we were so good that we were called AAA, as all of our names began with the letter A. As we worked there, I began to plan moving up within the casino. I knew it would be difficult, but I had a dream of buying my family's cabin from my parents and living up in the country while I finished college. Sadly, on my first attempt to becoming a supervisor, I failed and ended up training the person who did get the job. I didn't complain, I just took it as a sign that I needed to up my game. Now, here our story really begins. See, our head chef was being transferred to the Italian restaurant, and the assistant chef was taking his place, meaning we were going to hire a new guy. Let's call the new guy Kevin. When Kevin first came in, he seemed okay. Not great or awful. He was just there, and we had no real reason to talk most days, as we were usually pretty busy. Then, maybe a month after Kevin started working there, I had my first real interaction with him. And it, well, was something. It was at night with the dinner rush just starting to pick up, and I told my coworkers that I was going to fill up my water bottle before it happened. They said okay, and that they would be doing the same once I got back. But before I could leave the steakhouse to go to the break room, Kevin called out to me, "OP, where are you going?" Just getting a drink before we get busy, I told the girls, "Then why aren't you using the waitstaff drink fountain?" I was blinking and confused. We were told when we started that staff are only supposed to get drinks from the break room. Don't give me that. I see the waitstaff getting drinks there all the time. You're just going there to waste time. I'm gonna have to write you up for this. Wasting time? The break room is just down the hall. In the time we've spent having this conversation, I could have gone down there, filled my bottle with ice, gotten my drink, and gotten back here. Kevin then opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, the head chef caught sight of us standing there and came over to see what was going on. Before I could open my mouth, Kevin spoke up, explaining the whole thing with a superior look on his face. That, however, faded when the chief spoke. "Kevin, OP is right. Employees are only supposed to use the drink fountains in the break room. I'm gonna have to talk to the waitress supervisor about this. OP, go get your drink. I need to talk to Kevin in private." So I did. After that, I was pretty much confused by what just happened. At first, I was willing to give Kevin the benefit of the doubt, believing that he honestly didn't know about that rule, that maybe chefs and superiors were allowed to use the waitstaff station, assuming that it applied to everyone. However, when I brought this up to my coworkers, they said similar things happened with them, that he had pulled them over for a minor infraction of the rules, and when they just said they were sorry, he let them off with a warning. So they suggested that he was just marking his territory and would have gone easier on me if I hadn't questioned his authority. It was after that, however, that I began to notice things. Firstly, the waitstaff was no longer talking with Kevin as they were pissed off at him for getting the crackdowns at their station. It was during this time that I began to realize just how often he hung out with them. He was also always calling over my coworkers, asking them to help him with a job like peeling potatoes for hours, leaving me alone. What's more, whenever I stopped to speak with one of my supervisors, who happened to be a young woman, he would yell at me to get back to work. Slowly, I began to suspect that he had other intentions. These suspicions were later confirmed during that summer. For those of you who have never been in a professional kitchen, it can get hot. And in the summer, it can get really hot, and the odors can sometimes overpower you. On this day, I was working at one of our massive sinks, scraping off the remains of perch and giving the pans a deep clean when Kevin called me to the office. Now, this was odd, as I had only ever been called to the office to get my 10-cent raises while getting a performance evaluation, and neither of those were to happen until January. Curious, I followed him to the small room where he gestured me to enter first. I did, finding a woman I've never met before sitting at one of the desks there. When I entered, she looked up from her work to give me a curious look that said, "Hello, can I help you?" You know the look. Then Kevin spoke as he shut the door, walking in backwards as he did. "OP, you stink." The woman said, "Excuse me?" At this, Kevin jumped before turning around. The woman was looking at him with a rage, while Kevin looked lost. It didn't take me long to realize that he didn't know she was in there. "Sorry, I misspoke. I meant he smelled bad. We're getting complaints about his BO." Now, like I said, the room was small, so small that I felt cramped being in there with two other people. With the way we were positioned, I was pretty close to the woman, who was growing more annoyed. "I don't smell anything. Sir, would you mind if I get a little closer?" I said it wouldn't be a problem, and allowed her to get close enough to sniff me. She did it maybe 2 or 3 times before pulling away. "I don't smell anything." That's when I spoke up. "Look, if someone said I smell, then I'm sorry, but I'm working over greasy sinks full of chemicals to clean off pans with fried perch on them, in a room that feels like 100 degrees. And on top of that, the aprons we are given are not the best." To emphasize my point, I gestured to my shirt, which was wet and full of bits and pieces of fish. I see, I'm gonna have to take a look at those and see if they need any replacing. OP, how about you cool down for a bit in the break room? Kevin, you stay, we need to have a talk. After that, 3 things happened. The first was that the stewards got new aprons, which made all of us happy, as they hadn't been replaced in years. Second, from then on, if Kevin wanted to talk to me about an issue, another staff member had to be there as a witness. And if there wasn't one, I was to find that woman, who I learned was the steakhouse manager. Third, all bets were off between me and Kevin. While he couldn't pull me to the side like that, he did start yelling at me whenever he could in public. If he caught me standing around, like when I was waiting for the dishwasher to fill up, he would yell at me to get back to work from across the room before going back to talk to one of the girls. He would just berate me for any little thing he could, just to make me miserable. Soon, I came to realize that he saw me as an obstacle between himself and all the female staff members, as I was on good terms with all of them. I even wondered if he thought I was like a harem protagonist based on how many I worked with. For over the next year, I tried everything in my power to stop him while still trying to get that supervisor position. I went to HR, writing up complaints only for them to ask, "What do you want us to do about this?" And when I went to my head supervisor, he just said that I needed thicker skin. It seemed like every day it just got worse. On top of that, my identity was stolen twice. The first targeting my bank account, while the second one was my tax return. With the bank refusing to help and the legal department of the casino dragging their feet to help me, I was in the red for a long time, making my situation all the worse. There would be days when I would have to collect cans in the break room for gas and had to give away one of my cats. Thankfully, there were good people still around. A bunch of my coworkers came together to give me small packs of food, and some of the line cooks helped sneak out some meats that they were about to throw away. Then came the big night. It had been a concert night on one of the coldest nights of the year. So cold that several keys had snapped in the door locks because they had frozen shut. I had managed to get to my car and turn it on, leaving it running for a couple of minutes as I headed back to the locker room in order to enjoy my only comforts left, a book. The plan was to just read a couple pages and then I would be out of there. But before I could get past my first paragraph, the doors to the locker room opened and there strode in Kevin. He looked around for a moment before his eyes fell on me and a wicked smile appeared on his face. "Who told you you could punch out, OP? Not me, that's for sure. I just got a complaint by the night crew saying that your dishwasher is a mess. Clearly, you didn't clean it at all. Now you go back there and clean it right now, and I better not see you punching in, or else you'll be fired." With that, he strode out of the room laughing. For a moment, I just sat there in utter confusion, wondering if he could do that. I felt scared because if I lost my job, then I wouldn't know what to do. I was behind on my student loans. I had to drop out of college by this point due to various reasons. Behind on paying my parents' rent. Could barely afford to keep the one cat I kept who had been abandoned. For the first time in years, I felt so overwhelmed with fear that I felt like I could begin crying at any moment. Then the moment passed and I was furious. This guy had been doing this to me for too long. It didn't matter if he could or couldn't. I was done with this. I had to get out of there. As I stood up, I found myself making a plan fueled on by my rage. I had kept the fact that my identity had been stolen from my parents, partly out of shame and partly out of pride, as I wanted to get myself out of this mess. Well, no more. I was going to tell them about it and ask if I could move back in with them. I would even ask for help looking for a new job down there. Sure, it would mean losing my dream home in the country, but at this point, being stable was more important. But before I could do anything, another thought crossed my mind, making me smile. He wanted me to wash the dishwasher right now without punching back in? Okay, I'll do just that. So I left the locker room, barely hearing the security guard stationed nearby as he called out to me. No, I ignored him and everyone else as I mentally prepared myself to do this. When I got to the kitchen, there were piles of dishes, pots, pans, and a slew of other items that needed to be cleaned in quantities that are only ever seen on concert nights. But I ignored that, as well as the 3 stewards who were working hard, shutting down the machine and emptying it. What are you doing? Sorry, but Kevin told me that you told him that no one had cleaned the dishwasher and that it was a mess. So much that I had to come back and clean it without punching in, or else I would be fired. The color on everyone's face is drained. When the first person managed to compose himself, he told me that none of them had seen Kevin, and that the machine was perfectly cleaned when they arrived. Now, hearing this did make me feel bad, as what I was doing would put them behind. But Kevin told me to do this, so I was following it to the letter, while also making sure everyone there knew who sent me. Seeing that I wasn't going to stop, not that it mattered at this point as the machine had been drained, one of them went to get the night supervisor. While he was gone, the other 2 began to argue with each other over whether or not Kevin could order us to stay past our shifts and fire us if we refused. It didn't help that the casino had this nasty habit of offering employees a room to stay in when the roads were snowed over, only to make them work all night as they were on call. When the night supervisor came, she asked me what was going on. I repeated my story while cleaning the machine. She said that Kevin had not spoken to her and was gone before stating that he doesn't have the power to fire me. I just told her that I really couldn't take the chance. Then I asked her how to put in my 2 weeks notice. That confused her even more, asking why I was doing this if I was just planning on leaving anyways. I told her that I would need time to make arrangements for my future and that getting one last paycheck was important. So I wrote up my 2-week notice, even mentioning why I was leaving before hitting the road. When I got home, it was 3 a.m. and with all the rage now out of my system, I just crashed onto my bed with my uniform still on. The next morning, I was awoken to the sound of my phone ringing. It was the casino. The head stewarding supervisor was asking if I could come in and talk about last night. At first, I told him no, that I couldn't come in early just to come back home. However, he said it was important. Curious, I told him I would be there in an hour or 2. When I arrived, I was taken back to the steakhouse office to find it crammed with people. The night supervisor was still there, the night security officer was there, my supervisors were there, several head chefs were there, and the steakhouse manager was there, looking like her face would erupt into flames at any moment, as she stared at the one figure who was sitting. It was Kevin, hunched over in his seat, looking like a child who was in a timeout. I was then told that they knew what happened. After I had my talk with the night supervisor, she went to security and found footage of Kevin looking out the door before heading towards the locker room, and finishing off with him leaving with a grin minutes before I left the room. After that, she called in Kevin to show up the next morning. He tried to lie his way out of this, stating that it never happened, and I was just lying to get him in trouble. The supervisors then said that it was a simpler matter to check, as they had the security guard that was by the room, and that they can check the footage. Instantly, he remembered that he had spoken to me, only I had misheard him, and that he would never tell me to work without punching in. The night supervisor and the others in the room then asked, "Why would OP lie? Who told you that the machine needed cleaning? Why would he be the only one who needs permission to leave?" And so on. Over and over, Kevin tried to lie only to change his story again and again, until finally he realized he had been caught. The steakhouse manager then turned to me before apologizing, asking me if I would consider staying. The head manager also apologized, asking the same. For a moment, I was going to say no, but then I had a stupid idea that if I did this, then I might have a shot at becoming a supervisor myself and not have to leave. So I said sure, but only if Kevin never talks to me again. If he has a problem with what I'm doing, he has to run it by the head chef unless it's an emergency. They agreed. Later, I heard a few stories on why they finally acted. The first, and least likely in my opinion, was that this incident finally caused someone higher in the food chain to notice all the written complaints I had on Kevin, and was demanding answers. The second was that they didn't want to lose me just yet. Remember how I said that we used to move around from area to area? Well, turns out there were now only 2 employees who knew how to work in every restaurant, meaning I could go into any area and know instantly where everything goes and how that area operates without wasting anyone's time. But the most likely reason was due to the union. News about what had happened the night before had spread throughout the casino faster than I ever could have imagined. And if they didn't take care of this, there was a greater chance that the union reps would seize on it. In the end, I stayed in the steakhouse longer than Kevin did, as he left 2 years later. But before he did, I offered to throw a pizza party for everyone the day after he left. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Ol Cuss. It says, "Good story, but you didn't emphasize something which I think would be the biggest reason for their jumping all over Kevin. Frankly, they should have fired Kevin on the spot. At least in my state, requiring you to work without logging in is flat out illegal, and the fines can be generous. I remember when 4 coworkers were fired for doing that voluntarily without management knowledge. While they were being ethical about it, if they didn't fire them, they were running big risks with the state." Okay, so Kevin got a dressing down by the steakhouse manager for what they did to OP earlier in the story. And then they just kept on doing things to get OP in trouble or make them work extra hours and just be a general inconvenience. So why the hell wasn't Kevin fired at this last meeting that they had with everybody there? Not only were they forcing OP to work, which was breaking labor laws, they had been talked to before. They were already on warnings. So why the heck were they allowed to still work there for another 2 years? Were they sleeping with somebody in upper management? Who knows? The last thing I want to touch on this one, OP, was that I was extremely sorry to hear that you had to give up one of your cats. That must have been one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life, and you never should have been driven to go that far. This story comes to us from One Piper Piping. "Sure, everyone can come in." Friend of mine, who we'll call Buddy, said I could share this. Background: Buddy worked for a company that got on the hybrid work from home train early. He got his job around 2012. These events take place around 2016. We live in New Jersey, and his office was in New York City. His contract said that he had to be in 1 day a week, same day each week, and up to 5 days a month, so 1 additional day on top of his weekly day. If work brought him in more than that, he got paid his hourly billable rate for his commute and any extra hours. His commute was 1.5 to 2 hours each way, so that could quickly add up to hundreds or thousands of hours. Other than a couple of full-time in-office folks, his coworkers had similar contracts and had to be in 1 to 8 times a month, and some lived as far away as Boston or DC. They worked in a well-paid niche consulting field, so I guess this was worth it to everyone. On to the story. Buddy's company had a client who was very old school, and their point of contact is a jerk. On a video call, the client notices that some staff do not appear to be in the office, before Blur was as common, and demands that all of the work done for their contract be done in an office. Rants about professionalism. Buddy's manager simply says, "Okay." Manager calls a meeting afterwards with Buddy's team. He knows they're upset, but asks them to prepare to come into the office daily for the next 4 to 6 weeks. Tells them to keep very careful track of receipts, costs, times, etc., and asks them to trust him. For the people who live further away, tells them he'll help set up accommodations for them and their families if necessary. Because the company treats people well, everyone goes along with it, with minor grumbling. About 5 weeks go by, everyone is coming in daily. Remember when I said that most people didn't come in? So yeah, not much space in the office. The company liked teleworking because it allowed them to have a New York City headquarters, but not much space. Everyone keeps careful track of commuting costs, etc., time, and is getting reimbursed for their travel and everything they are owed. This included some folks who had contracts that covered lodging if they had to come in more than a day or 2 in a row. Then, one day, the manager tells them they can go back to their regular schedule. Everyone notices jerk client is gone, but that the company is still their client. Later on, Buddy finds out what happens. As per the terms of the contract, the client had to pay for all of that overage, frustrating for the employees, but Buddy said no one was too mad knowing that it was temporary. Buddy's manager also knew that the same jerk point of contact had been a jerk. He had apparently gotten tired of being asked to sign contract modifications. Buddy said usually these were set at modifications over $1,000 or something, but this guy had thought these sign-offs were below him, and so set that threshold much higher, something like $100,000. Due to the wording of the contract, this was $100,000 per change, not total. So in the 5 weeks that everyone was coming in full-time, he had managed to cost his company a few $100,000. But since each individual employee was a single change, no one noticed until the next billing cycle. Jerk got called out by his own company and they tried to contest the payment. Turns out the contract was very clearly written and the client had to pay. On top of that, this is a pretty niche field, and so the client didn't really have many other options if they wanted to change consultants at that point. Jerk point of contact got fired, and, according to Buddy's manager, couldn't really find work in their smallish field. Buddy and his coworkers got a nice chunk of money. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called LordJiba7. It says, "This is how you show your employees that you care about them. Rather than accept the terms of a demanding client and shrug it off as a necessary cost of doing business, you ask your team for additional support, in exchange for appropriate reimbursement for the hassle, while setting the client up to pay for their own arrogance, in a way that will inevitably result in everything going back to normal for your team, and showing the client why your team prefers to work this way." OP responded and said, "Yeah, Buddy is still at this company from what I know. He said that he could make more money elsewhere, but that this place has a good work-life balance and genuinely seems to care, at least a little, about their people. And they have pretty low turnover for his industry." So a whole team of people had to go into the office for 5 to 6 weeks, literally putting their lives on hold. What happened with their kids, their pets, and other non-work obligations during that time? We obviously didn't hear any of that fallout in the story, but I'm guessing a lot of these people who had to come in for work were a lot more put out than we're hearing. And that makes you wonder, was it worth all that extra money? Yeah, actually, it probably was. This story comes to us from Black Compy. Make sure to understand corporate policy. Some years ago, I was working for a large corporation. One of the responsibilities of the team I was on was to offer on-the-job training for employees and managers on a number of topics that are not important here. The point is, we took our job seriously and tried to do the best work we could. Among other things, that meant changing the training topics and content on a regular basis to make sure it was up to date with industry standards and what our colleagues actually needed to know. At some point, we were approached by corporate HR. Apparently, our trainings were bypassing most of the central controlling and approval processes, which was creating issues for them. I could understand that. However, these processes were awful, slow, unnecessary, bureaucratic, and HR showed no interest in improving them. There was no way we could follow them without sacrificing our quality standards. I could have outright refused to follow them and created a massive conflict, but there was a better way. We set up a workshop with HR to make sure we understood the processes we needed to follow in detail. Over several exhausting hours, we mapped out every single step that needed to be done by anyone along every step of the way. Flip charts with scribbles and diagrams quickly filled up every square foot of available wall. At the end of a long and exhausting afternoon for everyone involved, I pointed out that we now had a full picture of what needed to be done. Good work, everyone. But we still needed to align on the next steps. How would we get there? It was at this point that the HR manager in the room asked whether we could postpone that topic for the follow-up workshop, as everyone seemed to be tired. Of course, we agreed. Funnily enough, that follow-up workshop never happened. Whenever the topic came up, everyone was quick to state how busy they were at the moment, And could we delay for a few more weeks? A year or two later, our training program had to end for an entirely unrelated reason, so it didn't matter anymore. So if you ever need to refuse to do something in the corporate world, don't say you won't do it, accept it, and make sure it slows to an excruciating crawl. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Paul Cosmith. It says, I have avoided a lot of work in my career by telling people I couldn't start until they did something I needed to get started. They never gave me what I needed to start, so I never started. A little bit of a trick from the management perspective is to set up a whiteboard and make sure that people know who is ultimately responsible for ensuring things are completed on schedule. You have all the team members' names on that whiteboard, exactly what tasks you need them to complete at the top, and then either red, yellow, or green next to their names, because those people are going to move mountains to turn their line green. If no one is responsible, or there is no schedule, or you aren't reporting on it, they won't do it because it's not worth doing. This story comes to us from Mr. Chameleon DEC. Okay, I'll do it your way. Back in the 2000s, I worked for a bank, and for 2 of those years, I was the head teller. As the head teller, I also had to keep up with the cash in the vault. Now, it is never a good look for a bank to run low on money, but it happens. With that being said, I would try to order so that I didn't have too much, but enough on hand to keep us from panicking. Now, on to the story. There was a system that would tell me at the end of the week how much money I should order and/or ship out. I will be honest with you, I went with my gut on this because 1, I knew my house, and 2, I paid attention to what kind of week it was going to be, holiday weekends, heavy paydays, etc. So my boss came to me to tell me that I was ordering too much and ignoring what the system said. My response? You can also see that I'm using whatever I'm ordering. I'm not just hoarding. So I was told, just do what the system says. Okay, bet. I gave my team the heads up. The next few weeks are going to suck. They're telling me that I'm ordering too much, so I'm going to do exactly what they told me to do. You can direct all the BS to me. If people get mad, don't worry about it. I'll take the heat. So for 3 weeks, I did exactly as I was told. And what I thought was going to happen did. It got to the point where we're cashing large checks in 20s and barely able to do that. Apparently, the complaints started going uphill because the following conversation happened. We're getting complaints about the branch not having enough big bills. I figured that would happen. We want to know why. I'm doing exactly what I was told. Whatever the system is telling me to do, I'm doing. But y'all already knew that. This can't keep happening. It wasn't happening when I was ordering the way I needed to. So now you have a choice to make. Do what you need to do for now until we figure this out. Okay. I was pretty much left alone after that. As a side note, I actually reached out to that specific department to ask about a workaround so that I wouldn't have to keep having this conversation. The solution they gave was so simple, and I never had that issue again. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Stuzzy. It says, thanks for the story. I am curious about the specific solution the department gave you. OP responded and said, basically, if I needed way more than what was recommended, then I was told to enter the extra amount in a certain section when I placed the order. That way, I was still complying. The caveat to that was if I consistently did this and that extra wasn't being used, that was my butt. So I made sure to do this in a way that I knew I was going to go through that money. As some of you might know, way back in the day, I managed a payday loan location. And before you rip me a new one on that one in the comments, I only lasted a year there because I had to check my morals at the door every time I went to work. But that gave me experience in having to order in cash in very large amounts according to what the system told me I was going to need, which definitely didn't take into account anything that was happening in our specific town. There were a bunch of times that we ran out of large bills because you just had to jump through too many hoops in order to change what you were allowed to order in. What I'm getting at is whether it's a bank or in my case a payday loan place, people should be given a little bit more authority on what they can order in when they know what's going on with their particular store. Not somebody up in a head office going, no, you don't need that, not knowing at all what's going on. This story comes to us from Depleted User. I want it to look nice around here. I live in a very tenant-friendly area. We have rent control, and landlords are not allowed to do things like demand security deposits, enter the property without proper written notice, or include no pet clauses in leases, which renew automatically every month after a fixed term ends. For the last 11 years, my husband and I have had a great relationship with our landlord, Joe, fake name. We've been very lenient in regards to repairs, and Joe was very forgiving when my husband and I both lost our jobs at the same time in 2016 and fell a few months behind on rent. We are now ahead on rent, but Joe is still very behind in maintenance and repairs. We have a whole laundry list of issues my landlord is aware of but hasn't done anything about for years. But we didn't care because he left us alone and has been overall very kind to us. A few years ago, our landlord allowed us to start storing stuff in an old, run-down shed in behind our rented portion of the yard. We never stored anything valuable out there because it's falling apart, and squirrels have been using it to store walnuts from the numerous walnut trees in our yard. We had an old barbecue, lawnmower, ladders, and outside toys for my kids in there, until recently. A few months ago, Joe shows up asking about the shed, wanting to know what we had stored out there. I told him just some old junk we'll probably throw out soon. He told us that the family next door has a mouse problem, we don't, and he wants us to clear out the shed to prevent issues, and because I want it to look nice around here. I said, okay, I'll talk to my husband and we'll get it cleared out whenever we get a chance. I have an infant at home, so I can't go out back and clean it out myself unless someone else is here to watch the baby. My husband had a scheduled surgery, so he wasn't able to do any heavy lifting until after he recovered. Admittedly, cleaning out the old shed was not a high priority. Then, Joe sent me a passive-aggressive text. I just wanted to remind you that tomorrow is garbage day. We know, garbage pickup has always been Monday. And we need to work together to keep the rental property nice for everyone to enjoy. I replied, asking him if he had plans to fix the shed, to remove his scrap pickup truck, or to remove his open compost piles and heaps of mixed concrete and scrap metal he has out by the shed he wants us to clean. I also explained that my husband just had surgery and that we weren't planning on cleaning the shed that day. Reddit, he did not like that. He showed up unannounced, walked inside, and proceeded to yell at us in front of our kids. He complained about his personal finances and the economy, inflation, property taxes, swore at us about our effing crap, told us we can't use the shed anymore, and threatened to evict us because clearly you don't like living here and I can get way more for this house than what you're paying now. We told him to leave and that we will not communicate with him anymore unless in writing. He said, fine, we'll do it all by the book from now on, and stormed out. The next day, he put an eviction notice in our mailbox complaining that we have excessive garbage and waste in outbuildings, that we refuse to discuss this issue and corrective action with the landlord, and even adding that he felt it was unreasonable given the fact that he didn't evict us for late rent back in 2016. The notice gives us 7 days to correct the issues, or else my landlord can file for an eviction hearing. The next day, while I cleaned out everything belonging to us, sans the walnuts and squirrel poop from the shed, my husband got busy contacting local bylaws and the Rental Housing Enforcement Agency, traffic cops for landlords. He was given information on how to file against the landlord for refusing to do repairs, illegal entry, loss of an amenity, the shed, and harassment. After a surprise inspection that happened last week, we were given a report that said Joe was given 90 days to fix the roof, plumbing, and weeping tile. he must demolish the shed and either erect a new shed or give us a rent reduction, because the shed was an assumed amenity. According to my neighbors with the mice issue, the provincial government is also involved now because apparently he filled in a pond without a permit. And now the fire department doesn't have a nearby water source in case of fire. No hydrants out here. The city, by law enforcement, threatened to fine him for every day that he leaves his large pile of broken concrete and rebar out back. The cherry on top happened yesterday. He sent me a text to tell me that him and the plumber were going to be there within the hour. Normally, I'd be okay with short notice, despite the law saying he must provide 24 hours written notice. Not this time. I told him we need 24 hours notice. He showed up, knocked on the door, and when I reminded him that I won't speak to him in person anymore, he called the police saying that I was being hostile towards him, and he doesn't feel safe coming here. He sat outside for 4 hours waiting for the police, who later called me instead of showing up. The officer who called said that Joe was told to stop harassing us and that he needs to provide 24 hours notice to enter the home. He wanted to make sure Joe left and gave proper notice, and asked me if I wanted an officer there tomorrow to keep the peace. If Joe doesn't do the repairs he's supposed to do, we plan on taking him to court and filing for a rent reduction, and for a lien to be put on the property so he can't just sell it. We're just doing it by the book from now on, and just want it to look nice. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Fancy Conversation 42. It says, "Lovely bit of revenge here. It is in everyone's interest to know their rights when they are renting. There are so many things that can be done about terrible landlords." OP responded to this one and said, "A lot of landlords will try and take advantage of tenants that don't know their rights. My husband and I believe that Joe assumed we didn't know what our rights were, because we haven't exercised them in the last 11 years, as a courtesy. We also think Joe wanted the shed cleared out because it's cheaper to blame us and the mess in the shed for the rodent issue next door than it is to hire an exterminator." A commenter called IRman responded to this and said, "It sounds like poor Joe didn't read the book he was planning to go by." OP responded to this one and said, "Yeah, I don't know what he thinks he's doing. He called the cops saying he didn't feel safe being here, but then proceeded to hang out here for 4 hours waiting for a cop to come by, and, I don't know, force me to talk to him?" This one was quite interesting to me because it's plainly obvious that OP is from the same province in the same country as I am. Here, tenants are really well taken care of, and there's a lot of things you can do to get back at a landlord that's being a dink. On the flip side, however, tenants are able to stay in places without paying for a very long time because of the process that the landlord has to go through in order to get them out. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Back to the story though, I think it's funny how the landlord is harping on OP because of the stuff they have in the shed, supposedly causing the mouse problem, when the landlord themselves has open compost piles out back. Gee, I wonder why the mice are there. This story comes to us from EXE the Hero. Male staff must wear dress shoes or boots. The superintendent of my old school was comically rigid in his views and seemed to have his mindset stuck in the 1960s. He told us, without a hint of irony, that the only way students would respect us is if we were dressed professionally. Not even business casual was okay for him. Faculty wearing sneakers or blue jeans was a legitimate cause for termination under our contract. The male staff dress code demanded that we wear long sleeve, button-up shirts with a tie, dress pants with a belt, and dress shoes or boots every day. There was, however, a note in our contract stating that the dress code could be reasonably relaxed if not possible due to a medical condition. No details were provided beyond that. Well, my wife and I moved apartments one weekend and my feet hurt, so I made the executive decision that that was a medical condition and wore my sneakers to school on Monday. I figured I could just lay low and keep my feet hidden from any pesky administrators, and I knew that my students wouldn't care. My students, in fact, thought it was awesome that part of my appearance was that of a real person, laugh out loud. Wouldn't you know it, that was the day the superintendent and building administrators were coming around, room by room, to give the school board members a building tour. So, of course, I had to get up and greet them. Nobody said anything to me, but I did receive a nasty email from the assistant principal with CC to the principal and superintendent, reminding me of the expectations set forth in the teacher dress code. No note in my file or anything, just a warning. Fair enough, I suppose, but it pissed me off that they didn't even ask why I decided to wear sneakers and just sent me a warning with no chance to defend myself. So, cue the malicious compliance. If you noticed from my post title, the dress code just said dress shoes and boots. Well, are you familiar with Demonia boots? I went ahead and bought the most over-the-top, bombastic pair of boots on their website. I'm talking black leather with 3-inch platforms, chains, studs, zippers, and straps galore. They came about halfway up my shins, and of course, I tucked my pants into them. My students thought they were amazing, and there are pictures of my feet all over various social media sites. A few of my coworkers took it upon themselves to give me a stern warning, and some others gave me a high five. After 4 days of wearing these boots with no incident, the principal ended up behind me in the hallway. Rather quickly, he asked, "What the heck are those?" So I told him they were boots to ensure I'm in compliance with the dress code, and kept walking. That afternoon, I received an email from him stating that I was intentionally being unprofessional, and this would be documented in my record, and further dress code offenses could lead to disciplinary action or suspension. I immediately got in touch with my union, who quickly dealt with that in my favor, since they were, indeed, boots. I also explained to the union that I only did this because of the nasty email I received for wearing sneakers with my sore feet. The union rep immediately smirked, told me she was unfamiliar with that rule, and told me to go ahead and wear whatever footwear I wanted, and that if anybody had a problem, I could just claim I had sore feet. Long story short, I ended up wearing my sneakers every single day for the entire rest of the school year and never had another problem. My favorite part of this is that I inspired a few other rebels, and by the time I left that school, there were a solid 10 of us that were just routinely wearing sneakers or other non-dress code compliant footwear in blatant disregard of the dress code every single day. Good times. Definitely a legacy that I left behind in that school. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called K1YCO. It says, "Too bad you couldn't continue with skirting the rules more and put on some dress shoes that just had a bunch of outlandish designs on them. Or put on some women's dress shoes if it doesn't mention if they have to be gender specific." OP responded and said, "Truthfully, I wasn't trying to ruffle any feathers. Just needed to make it clear that I didn't appreciate being warned without any questions asked." Well, okay, maybe I wanted to ruffle a few feathers. Another commenter called Bitter Fishing Butt said, "I remember exactly 0 shoes that any of my teachers wore. They have literally no impact on their teaching abilities. In fact, the only shoe-related thing I remember is a university lecturer who didn't wear shoes, and he still managed to teach." This commenter is completely right. I don't remember any of the shoes that any of my teachers wore back in high school or even in elementary school. It just didn't matter. It seems to me like these administrators are just looking for reasons to put their foot down and enforce arbitrary rules. This story comes to us from Mors Invicta Est. "The tyranny of the majority is not a democracy." Just a short one to celebrate a victory. The dilemma: our company has flexible working hours, and some of us who are late sleepers or have to take care of small children in the morning will not start work before 9 or 10 a.m. Unfortunately, one department we work with has their entire management level filled with early risers who just love to set up early morning meetings. We need another weekly meeting to discuss current operations. How about 8 a.m. on Monday? Let's vote on it. The early risers are the majority, our arguments are disregarded, and their boss says, "Well, we voted for it, and the majority believes that 8 a.m. is the best time. You'll have to adjust. That's how democracy works. Okay, he's right. If your name is Orban or Erdogan, then that's how democracy does work. Majority good, minority bad. Down with the minority. Recently, the number of topics started to exceed the capacity of that meeting, so it was decided to have another weekly to deal with the rest. We asked for nothing more than to schedule the new meeting after 10 a.m. But that's for the majority to decide. I'll ask my assistant to schedule a new meeting that fits everyone's schedule, he said with a smirk, knowing that the assistant would ignore any morning blockers that were not actual meetings. Time for some malicious compliance. Since the assistant had already left, early risers, the opposing forces gathered and started to invent new weekly and daily meetings for our department. Now we had early morning meetings every day, a daily just after the early risers lunch break, we prefer to eat later, and various other weekly meetings that blocked other important time slots. Today, the assistant surprised the department head with her new meeting proposal for a mid-afternoon, just before he usually leaves, and likes to leave a bit earlier, since all earlier slots were already blocked. I know for sure that he suspects foul play, but our team has joined the effort, and even my boss has claimed that she's only seeing valid entries in our calendars. The people's democratic resistance works. Take that, tyrannical pretenders. We probably wait another 2 or 3 weeks before we delete the dummies from our calendars. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called, Coffee. It says, I've had later shifts with early meetings, and my bit of malicious compliance to stop it was overtime pay. As soon as the company had to give me time and a half for these meetings, suddenly the times weren't set in stone. Any good manager would actually look at the schedule of everybody on their team that needed to be in a meeting and would schedule that meeting during the core hours when everybody is in the office. If they're scheduling for first thing in the morning, the only people that they're satiating is themselves. OP, you need to get together with a few other of the late starters and find a reason to set up a meeting with that manager. Schedule it for around 5 p.m. and when the manager says they can't do that, say, well, we have the majority, so your vote doesn't matter. This story comes to us from Base Overflow, Inflatable Slide plus Karen. Not sure if this goes here, but it kind of applies. Also, warning if you don't want to hear about a child getting hurt. I was working a weekend gig at a carnival outdoor festival circa 2002. My station for the day was working the large inflatable slide, steps going up on the right side and the slide on the left with a pad on the bottom. Basically, my job was to keep the line moving smoothly with minimal injuries. When a kid was at the top, I'd send the next up. This would give the child plenty of time to move off of the landing zone once they got to the bottom and free from any possible danger from the next participant. Everything was running fine until Karen showed up. Her child was about 7 and minded my instructions well, but when he reached the bottom, he began jumping up and down. No problem, he had a few seconds before the next child reached the top, but I asked him kindly to come down. He made his way over until Karen told him he could keep jumping. I gave it a few more seconds until the next child was ready to come down and asked the mother to please remove her child. She then started to borderline yell at me that her son wasn't hurting anything. At this point, I had to tell the child at the top to please wait. I had a back and forth with the mother, explaining that it's for his protection and it was holding up the line. This went on for a while when finally other parents started to complain and shout while the line continued to back up. She yelled at me to just send the next kid down as her son would be fine and she would get him down. Cue the malicious compliance. The child, who had been waiting patiently at the top, was significantly larger and was wearing jogging pants and socks. As soon as I signaled for him to come on, he jumped straight up and hit the slide with max velocity. Pretty sure he set a high speed record because by the time he hit the landing zone, he just skidded across the top and hit the other child with his feet. This sent the little boy flying about 10 feet onto the pavement. I didn't say a word, and neither did Karen. I just stared at her while she picked up her screaming child from the pavement and left. Anyway, I did feel bad for the child, but I hope Karen learned a valuable lesson. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called ResponsibleEnd7361. It says, even if she didn't, the kid probably learned too. 1. Listen to the ride attendant. 2. Don't trust mom to keep him safe. OP responded and said, ooh, I never thought about number 2. Great point. It really sounds like the other kid at the top of the slide understood the instructions and just bombed down that thing as fast as he could. Another part of me is sitting back thinking that OP was a little bit negligent here because they did send another kid down, knowing full well that there could be injuries. Karen may be a Karen here, but she would still have a case. This story comes to us from the Flaming Heads. Only one set of keys for the hotel. I used to work at a hotel on a large property that did a lot of business conferences. We had golf buggies to get around, 10 different conference rooms plus lots of other hotel facilities, storage rooms, etc. Upper management had a strict rule that important locks could only have one set of keys. Upper management also liked to save money by never fixing things when they broke. It must have looked good on paper. One week, we had a big spending client who had booked out the hotel for the week. Night 1, our sales team had got the times wrong for the dinner of several hundred people, so all available staff were sent over 2 hours early to start setting up. The hotel's general manager announced he would be over shortly to see how things were going, which was almost unheard of for him. What he found was about 20 staff standing around outside the venue. The conversation went something like this. Why is everyone standing around? We don't have the keys. We sent a staff member looking for the other supervisor who has the keys now. Where are your other set of keys? We've only been given the one set of keys. Why don't the staff have a radio on them? Radios have been broken for over a year and never approved to be replaced. Why do you only send one staff member to look for them? We only have the one working golf buggy. General manager grumbles and sends another staff member off on his buggy to look for the keys. Eventually, after everyone standing around for nearly 20 minutes, the keys turned up. The general manager was stressed out of his mind that such a big client might be kept waiting. For the supervisor, it was just another Monday. Malicious Compliance, the supervisor had access to a backup set of keys that they were strictly forbidden from using. Usually, in a situation like this, they would quietly use the forbidden keys and everything would go smoothly. But because the general manager decided to be there, they didn't mention the forbidden keys, causing delays and panicking management. Fallout: the next week, each supervisor got their own set of keys. A few weeks later, we got radios for the department. Upper management also started checking in on how things were going from time to time. Apparently, making rules without knowing how things actually work isn't such a good policy. Let's be honest here, this general manager, although they were stressed, really was a good manager. They saw that there was a problem and they fixed it immediately. I hope the general manager realized that they need to be around a little bit more often, because then they can see problems like this and make sure that they're taken care of, so that things run a little more smoothly. This story comes to us from Sperling Pipe. Need more space? This happened a number of years ago. For background, I work on a car ferry and am one of the crew members responsible for the loading of vehicles. I don't do it alone though, and it is a team sport. Before we load vehicles onto the car deck, we receive a loading list of booked traffic for the sailing. If someone is not booked, they can wait on standby to see if we can fit them on. With the deck loaded and the boat almost full, I said we could take a small MG if they didn't mind the squeeze. On came the green 1974 MGB, a very nice small car. After some gentle and slow guidance, it made it on with the smallest of margins. Cue the shouting from a man in his late 50s, early 60s. I'll call him Entitled Arse. You there, I can't get out of my car. There was enough room to open the doors, but not all the way, admittedly. This was besides the point though, because he was standing next to me a few cars away from his when he said it. What are you going to do about this? It's a disgrace. I had to ask him again to repeat his complaint and hope that he would realize how absurd his statement was. He said it again. I tried to stay composed and remembered that he might have had a bad drive or even a bad day up until this point. His wife was trying to tell him to be quiet and just to be grateful. But no. We were, myself and the other crew members, doing our best to help them. As soon as he said to one of the sailors, "I've paid for my ticket. I demand a full space, you effing morons," my mind was made up to help this gentleman. Cue malicious compliance. I said to him, "I'm very sorry for your inconvenience. You are of course right, sir. If you would like to get back into your car and just back up a little way, we'll be able to get you all the space you need. About bloody time." Once he was ready, I got one of the sailors to start guiding him from the back of the car. I said, "Keep it going," as his car backs up. Sailor guiding the car said, "Keep it going." He definitely knew what the plan was. The car was backed off of the boat and heading back for the car park. At this point, entitled Arse figured out what was going on and demanded to know what was happening. The sailor said that he would have all the room he needed waiting in the car park for the next boat. After entitled Arse lost the plot and came out with the usual threats of, "I know the managing director and I'll have you sacked," and we didn't look concerned, his wife snapped and went ballistic at him. Following a major dressing down in front of everyone, she made him apologize and ask politely if they could reboard. We said that because his wife was so awesome, that would be fine, but to listen to her advice in the future. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Mole Warp. It says, "She must have a rotten life being married to a butthole like that. I'm surprised he managed to squeeze his ego and sense of self-importance into an MG." OP responded and said, "He was very sheepish afterwards. I agree though, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be that uncommon." Don't we just love it when an entitled jerk gets put into their place and has to apologize like a little child in front of everyone? Like the commenter, part of me feels sorry for the woman that has to put up with that guy, but it also sounds like she can hold her own and keep him in check, so way to go. This story comes to us from CandidAd5642. Sometimes compliance is more fun. Background: this happened early 1990s, just after the Cold War was silently dropped. In my country, we had universal draft for any fit young man. The setup: I was stationed in a camp up north. Boredom reigned supreme. The camp had two gates, the main gate to the south at the end of a dead-end street, a few hundred meters from the main road, and a gate to the north. The officers' mess and the bachelor's officers' quarters was just outside that gate. To go from the rear gate to the main gate outside the camp, one would have to go out to the main road, move south some 100 meters, and then up that dead-end street. The instructions for guard duty at the gates were really simple. If you personally know the person and know that the person in question is actively serving, if the person can show military ID, or if someone in the first two categories can vouch for them, you can let them in. Else, they have to get in touch with the guard commander, usually located in the guardhouse just outside the main gate. No ID required to leave. Since the regular mess hall served something borderline edible at the good days, most officers would eat in the officers' mess. Since the Cold War was over, most on guard duty would not bother with the required ID checks. The malicious compliance. Serving in the north is boring. Guard duty is also boring. My troop found that checking ID, especially at the rear gate, could be a little fun though. In the morning, quite a few would forget their wallet with their ID in their rooms and have to run back to get it. No big deal, going back in and getting the wallet was just 5 minutes, but a bit of a hassle when they were already running late. And the later they were running, the more probable it was they had forgotten their ID. The real deal was after lunch, since a lot would leave their ID in the office, and so not have any way to collect it without getting into the camp. So they would have to go around nearly a kilometer and then go to the guard captain and get a note so they could enter through the main gate. easily at least 15 minutes extra on the less than 5-minute stroll back from lunch. Seems a lot of the officers in our direct chain of command, so we had to know them, or that had their ID ready, found this fun as well, since getting a colleague to vouch for them seemed difficult. The ones declining would be smiling and laughing about it. We got a lot of attaboys for following protocol, even from officers we had denied access. Sometimes you just need to turn a mundane task into a source of amusement. Even if this comes at the expense of inconveniencing a couple of officers, it's entertaining. And they played along too. Our next story is a two-parter. It comes from Flashy Room 321 and starts in the Am I the Butthole subreddit, but finishes in Malicious Compliance. So let's start with the Am I the Butthole post. It's titled, Will I Be the Butthole If My Girlfriend and I Kick Her Brother Out? My girlfriend, 24, and I, 24, decided to try to help her brother, 22, out of a DV relationship. We offered him a free place to live with financial support until he was able to get back on his feet. We made it blatantly clear that he would need to follow certain rules because he has a history of lying, disappearing, and multiple hospital visits due to his mental health. The rules were pretty simple. Do not contact the ex, get a job within a month, no dating until he sees a therapist regularly, etc. I should emphasize that these rules were agreed on by everybody, and we didn't just spring these on him out of nowhere. Literally, after 2 to 3 days of him staying in our apartment, he went back to his place to pack his things. We didn't have a problem with this because we had no reason not to trust him at the time. Today, I and his mom went to his apartment to help him move his stuff out, and that was the start of the crap show. When we arrived to his place, we discovered that he had not packed despite being there for almost a week, and his apartment was filthy. Despite that, most of the moving went fine until we tried to move his couch. When we picked up the couch, we saw cockroaches in it. We were aware his apartment had cockroaches, but we had no idea it was this bad because he told us it wasn't a big deal. He said he only saw one. I should bring up the fact that he came over to our place an hour before we started moving so that we could throw my couch away since we'd be using his. And we also told him that if we found any more roaches, that we could throw all his things away as we try very hard to keep our place clean. Needless to say, all his stuff got tossed in the dumpster and he did not take kindly to it. When I got home, my girlfriend called me and told me that her brother was having a mental crisis and that we need to go back to him ASAP. So obviously, we were there as fast as we could be. After we spent 4 hours in the emergency room, our state doesn't have any LTC for mental health. We were finally able to go home and let him get the help he needs. After a while of being home, we decided to go through his phone. He gave us permission to do this, and we found a lot of things that infuriated us. We discovered that not only was he regularly talking to his ex, he also had planned to have this mental breakdown after we were done moving and have us take him to the hospital. And he had also messaged another man about coming over at midnight to do God knows what. We feel that he has basically spat in our face despite bending over backwards to make a crappy situation work. So, Reddit, will we be the buttholes if we kick him out and let him figure his own life out? Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Pinky Stacy. It says, not the butthole. Your boyfriend's brother violated the agreement and manipulated the situation. It's clear he isn't ready to take responsibility for his actions and needs help beyond what you can provide. It's not your responsibility to fix his life, especially when he's actively trying to deceive you. Another commenter called IllAssistant9543 said, not the butthole. Number 1, he's an adult. He should be responsible for himself in the first place. Number 2, he should be responsible keeping everything clean. Number 3, he is clearly manipulating this situation and mooching. Kick him out and ghost him. Tell your girlfriend that she will not be having him over again. He can fend for himself at a shelter and learn the hard way. I feel like there is a very large violation of trust here. OP and the girlfriend are letting the brother into their apartment where all of their personal items are. I don't think I would trust this person when they are lying to you the whole time. I agree with the commenter saying that OP and the girlfriend just can't provide the help that the brother really needs. Alright, let's get into the update on this one, which was posted in Malicious Compliance. It's titled, "Want to be treated like the adult you are? Fine, fix all your own problems then." When I initially made my Am I the Butthole post, my girlfriend's brother faked a mental breakdown to get out of his responsibilities and put the workload on us. All the while, he was lying to us and talking crap behind our backs. So I'll continue from there. One thing I had forgotten to mention in the original post is that he left behind 3 cats in his apartment that he knew he was about to be evicted from. He had promised us over and over and over again that he was trying his hardest to find a place to rehome 2 of them, and that the 3rd one would come with him if he moved in. We made it blatantly clear that the cat coming with him would be his responsibility, despite being in our apartment, since we would be working and we would have very little time to get the cat used to our husky and our own 2 cats. I'll make it crystal clear that we did not surprise him with this information and that he agreed to our terms. Obviously, since he was in a mental hospital, everything got thrown into a loop. We agreed that we would assist him with finding the cats a new home, and unfortunately, since he was unable to provide any care for the 1 cat, he would be rehomed as well. We quickly discovered that he had only been talking to 1 person about them, despite us telling him repeatedly that he needed to have backup options just in case they no-showed. My girlfriend waited for almost an hour after the agreed upon time to meet in his apartment the day before the eviction for this person. And surprise, surprise, they no-showed. With no other option, our only course of action was to call animal control and impound all 3 cats. At first, the process of getting the cats out of the apartment was going pretty well. That was until I got a message from my girlfriend and she was super upset. It turns out her brother had told the officers that we told him that we would take care of the cats and that we would be responsible for any fines and penalties that came from the removal. We would also be at risk of losing our pets. I was pissed. I immediately called them and explained the agreement we had, and the officer I talked to was super helpful and understanding, which was appreciated. Later on, my girlfriend got a call from her brother, and he was livid. He was screaming at her things like, "How could you do this to me?" and "We're siblings." My girlfriend aired out all her grievances, all the lies, manipulation, talking behind our backs, his irresponsibility, everything. It was all deny, deny, deny. And we shut that down pretty quickly. Eventually, he said the magic words, "No contact." I had floated the idea around in my head myself and felt very relieved that I wouldn't have to be the one to bring it up. Needless to say, we happily obliged. Not 10 minutes later, he calls us again and says we need to bring him his car an hour and a half north of us along with all of his things. Yeah, no. No contact, no help, that's how I feel about it. So now he's stuck an hour away, he has no car, his family wants nothing to do with him, he has little to no place to live. His only options are to move back in with his ex or be homeless. His cats are in danger of being put down. The only thing I feel bad about is that the cats may be put down due to all of this, and it's not fair to them. They deserved a better owner, and if I had the time and space for them, I would have taken them in a heartbeat. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Thank You Happy. It says, "Save the cats and F her brother. Little boy needs to grow up. If that means hitting rock bottom, then so be it. He sounds like a tortured soul that needs to do some soul searching. Enabling him will bring everyone down to his disastrous self-standard." OP responded to this one and said, "Impounding them was our last resort, unfortunately. Every single shelter in our area has been full for months since it's the season to bring back any pets that were Christmas gifts and birthday presents. All of our friends and family already have pets and or have no space for a new one. We tried to make a Facebook post but they were all taken down. It truly breaks my heart, but I have no idea what to do when it comes to them. But I am open to any suggestions. Alright, I just found another comment from OP a little bit lower down. It says, update on the cats. Unfortunately, at this point, the cat situation is out of our hands. The person at the impound has told us it's completely up to the brother to decide what happens to them. Pisses me off because I know he probably won't do anything for them, but it's his choice to make. I'm sorry, everyone. OP, I understand you're sorry about the cats and that you wish you could do more about them, but keep in mind this shouldn't be on your conscience because your girlfriend's brother is completely responsible for what happens to those cats. I sincerely hope that the brother gets the help that he needs and you guys can just wash your hands of the situation. I know it's going to be hard, but sometimes that's just what you have to do. This story comes to us from LazyAd5441, Malicious Compliance Standoff. About 15 years ago, I used to work in the highly regulated area of inbound mortgage sales in the UK. Our calls were monitored for compliance and multiple failed calls led to action plans being put in place to get you back on track. Well, I had a terrible start to the year and failed 3 calls in a row. The usual follow-up and support didn't happen, and I turned things around and passed the next 4 months of calls with no action plan needed. In month 4, I get called into a meeting to discuss my need for an action plan. I was confused as it had been so long since I had failed a call. I was referred back to the call from the start of the year. I mentioned that I felt that the action plan was unwarranted as I had turned this around myself even without the support, and putting me on an action plan now was definitely closing the stable door after the horse had bolted. I was told this was non-negotiable. Okay, fair enough. The action plan is drawn up and there is a section for my comments. I state the dates of my failed calls, the record since the last failed calls, and my disappointment that the support was not offered at the time of need. I was told I wasn't allowed to record this on the performance plan. What they didn't realize at the time is how petty I am. So I researched the HR handbook, printed out the sections stating implicitly I was allowed to put any info I wanted, recognizing this in this section. I updated the performance plan to state I had been told I couldn't record my objections, the manager who told me that, and added the HR handbook section for good measure. Well, it turns out we were due for an inspection, and not intervening when there is a record of failed calls was a big issue. My diverting the lack of support back to management would not look good. They would not sign off my plan as it stood, and I would not back down either. The result was, I was not allowed to do my job. I was already job searching elsewhere, but I managed to spend 3 months being paid to job search and be available for additional tasks. This mostly ended up with me playing Mario Kart in the break room until busy work could be found elsewhere. When I eventually gave my notice, I was immediately put on a month's paid leave to get me out as soon as they could. This story drives home the point that when they give you the employee handbook when you first get hired somewhere, you need to keep it. Not only that, you need to read it from front to back because you never know when you'll be able to use it against them. This story comes to us from SafeSorbet8327. Won't let me work? Okay. A few years ago at my place of employment, they decided to bring in a new safety glasses policy. As I was a member of the safety committee, I was tasked with finding a company who could supply safety glasses that would fit our employees. And with a new criteria, it had to pass a pencil fit test. By this, I mean a regular pencil should not be able to pass around any part of the glass to enter the eye area. A tight fit, as it were. I called around and found a company that was able to come out and provide us with a choice of 120 different models and styles to choose from. This would allow us to fit everyone, from wide to thin faces, tall, slim faces, hawk-shaped, big-nosed, you name it, we would be able to get them fit. I thought that it was in the bag, piece of cake, or any other platitude you can think of. I almost dislocated my arm patting myself on the back. Well, of course, management has to step in and say, "This doesn't work for us." Their solution? Find a company that has only 6 different styles of glasses and make it work. As I wear prescription lenses, these new style glasses were not designed for this. They only have inserts which are clipped on inside. Well, to make the glasses pencil fit, the glasses fit, the frames are curved to fit your face, hence the insert is bent to fit the frame. Now just imagine taking your glasses and bending them to sit tight to your face. See how this distorts your vision. Now cue malicious compliance. I reported to my boss that I could not wear the new glasses as they distorted my vision and gave me headaches. Their solution was to have me try each model of glasses one at a time and get lenses made for them to see if I could find one that could work. Knowing that no matter what they did, wearing curved frames would not work, every time I got new lenses made, I made sure that they were high index, UV resistant, tinted, scratch resistant, and the best money could buy. I bought lenses for all 6 frame types at a cost of just over $7,000. At the end of this, I went to see my eye specialist, and he wrote me a letter stating that I'm not able to wear the new style glasses as they would damage my eyes. I took this letter into work and showed it to my boss. They didn't know what to do with me. I showed up for work every day, dressed and ready to work, but they never assigned me any work, as it would be too dangerous, even though I had worn my old safety glasses for the last 25 years. Suddenly, it's too dangerous. So, they had me just sitting in the lunchroom. I would play games on the computer. I was going to night school, so I completed a semester of school, and basically just screwed around. One day, I was playing video games, and our number 2 big boss walked in and saw me. I said good morning with a big smile and a wave. He didn't. A couple of days later, our number 1 boss walked in while I was reading the newspaper, and he asked me what I was doing, and I said, reading the paper. He said, why? I said, they told me it's too dangerous out there for me. The next day, I was back at work. 10.5 weeks I was off, and suddenly, the policy was changed. Wouldn't safety goggles work better than safety glasses in this case? And most safety goggles can go right over top of any prescription glasses that people might wear without pushing them at angles or anything. I'm actually amazed at how many stories we've had recently of people getting paid to do nothing at work. I want to remind you all again of a video I did about 2 years ago called Forgotten Employee, The American Dream. I'm going to link it down below. If you haven't seen or heard that one yet, you need to go there now. It's a story about a worker who was there for years without being noticed and having no work to do, and everything they went through. It's an amazing story. Check it out at the link in the description on YouTube and also on the podcast. This story comes to us from tourist number 865. Nobody passed the yellow line? Gotcha. It's gonna sound like it's fairly reasonable to start, but trust me, it gets silly really quick. Had just started working at one of the big railway companies as a safety officer, customer service rep. Now, as you can imagine, that is basically herding sheep, and not very effectively. People have places to go, but I'd rather they didn't end up dead. During probation, one of the bosses got moved to my station. Now, this guy could not have fit the police description of up his boss's butt more if he'd tried. Looking like he spent the last 40 years dreaming of having a badge on with significance, and by God, he was going to use it. On the platform of every station, there is a yellow line on the floor, few feet from the edge, to signify where not to walk, lest the turbulence turns you into a train's doormat. Simple stuff. And when a train is pulling up, you're to keep everyone behind it. No issues so far, that's literally my job. Now, for weeks, he'd been a stickler for his way, but he would mask it as, this came from head office. But on this particular day, whatever bee was in his bonnet came out in full force, and he was masking nothing. Once a train was stopped, So long as you don't have full gaggle at the door, we usually have no issues with one or two people. You know, the London crowd who won't wait, being next to the door ready. It's efficient if nothing else. The train had stopped, 3 people were waiting for the doors to open, they did, the train left. This guy starts shouting from literally the other platform, in front of other travelers, roasting the crap out of me. Safety, yes, but this was obscene. So he decided to enact a rule of his own. If you want to pass this probation, I want to see everyone behind that yellow line for a full 30 seconds before you signal to let the doors open. If a single person moves, you talk to them about safety and wait again. So let me get this straight. That 30 seconds resets for every time someone else doesn't listen and crosses the line? Did I stutter? Did you effing what? Oh, you're on, sweet child. Across that day, I was honestly looking at my watch more than I was anything else. Remember, it's for your safety after all. Plot twist, dual line station. One into the city, one on the way to London. No way past it. If a train is delayed, nothing else moves. Cue about 2 hours later, and sure enough, the dweeb butt manager comes charging down the platform. What the hell are these delays for? I've got head office tearing us a new one. Just making sure we adhere to the 30 seconds, boss. I've never had so much feedback about safety. Well, the feedback I'm getting is we now have a near 10 train bottleneck at this station. Firstly, it's you have a bottleneck, not us. Second, I'm merely doing exactly as you asked. His face dropped, clearly understanding what had happened. Right, then, well, you can talk to the area manager and explain this for yourself because he's gonna be here in about 15 minutes. He's coming here? Ha, deal. Did he go white as a ghost? Yes. Did he try stopping me seeing the area manager? Yes. Was he successful? Hell no. What ensued was maybe a 20-minute conversation between me and the area manager. Me finding out that this manager had been moved more than a few times for various issues. The meeting between them two lasted probably 90 seconds, if that, and then a very sheepish-looking manager slowly slinked up to me and in the lowest voice ever said, "You're doing a good job. I trust you to use your judgment with the onboarding process," and then immediately scuttled away. He's moved on since, but apparently it was a personal request this time. Can't think why. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Tom Marvolo Tomato. It says, "There are too many people who are under-medicated in positions of power." Another commenter down below called Bangley gave us a little bit of food for thought. They said, "This is a great story and it kinda makes sense, but as a train driver in the UK of 7 years, nobody signals to anyone to open the doors. So I'm not 100% sure about this story. Was your role train dispatcher and you're signaling to the driver and conductor to close the doors?" Conveniently enough, OP hasn't responded to any of the comments on this story, so we don't know if it's made up or not. So, I'd like to know your opinions. If you're listening on YouTube, comment down below and let me know your thoughts on this story. This story comes to us from Embarrassed Eye 2832. It's my job to deal with it? Sure. I work in public services. It was a new role, and I am the first and only one of me. Essentially, this means that my job scope can be pretty broad, and I have a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies. I have also gained the reputation of a no-nonsense problem solver. Cannot for the life of me think why. So when people have issues, they tend to come to me. I was busily hashing out a few tasks last week when I get something else slapped onto my plate. A manager of a service we commission with, appropriately named Karen, has apparently been working her way through people because she isn't getting the resolution she wants. So one of the managers in finance wants me to look into this for Karen. Now, a thing to note here is that every April we increase rates along with inflation, but she didn't get it. Thing is, it's out of our hands. The services we commission from her are funded between us and another separate public service, Public Service 2. We pay half, Public Service 2 pays half. but we haven't paid the increase because Public Service 2 hasn't agreed anything yet. What can I say? It's the public sector. Our team's conversation goes something like, "Hey, finance manager, I can't actually do anything about this because finance manager cuts me off. This is your job. It's your department that deals with these contracts, so deal with it. I don't care how, just get her off my back." Now, that's mostly paraphrased, except for that last sentence, which he said verbatim. "I don't care how, just get her off my back." I write in chat, "To confirm, I am to deal with this, and you do not care how?" Finance manager says, "Yes, for Christ's sake." I crack my knuckles and get to work, sending her the following email and CCing in finance manager and my own manager. "Dear Karen, I apologize for the delay in the inflationary increase for service. However, as this is jointly funded between ourselves and Public Service 2, we are beholden to their financial timelines. As Public Service 2 have not yet agreed to the 4.1% increase, we are unable to process it. Regardless of how many individuals you contact, this will remain the case until Public Service 2 sees fit to approve. In instances such as these, our recourse should be to head down to the offices of Public Service 2 and begin smacking naughty bottoms. But I fear HR would frown upon such action in these enlightened times. Might I suggest contacting Public Service 2 yourself in order to expedite the process? I'm sure finance manager, finance.manager at my place of work, would be happy to direct you to the appropriate contact and answer any further questions. Warmest regards, OP." I then immediately got a Teams call from my manager where for 30 seconds, all I could hear was laughing, and he asked me what was going on. I sent him the screenshots of the chat messages between myself and finance manager and relayed the Teams call. My manager told me that it was not, in fact, my job. How odd. And later that day, finance manager apologized, but also warned me that in the future, you should probably hold back on the bullock withering sarcasm. People might not find it amusing. I think I'm hysterical personally. OP added an update down below this one. It says, "Update, I had a Teams call from finance manager. Turns out he'd just gotten off the phone with Public Service 2. They'd called him asking who the heck Karen is and why they received 41 separate emails from her in the past week. Seems like someone set that particular pit bull onto Public Service 2. But whoever that person was must have made a terrible, horrible error, because they sent her to a completely different team that were apparently very confused as to what was going on. So they sent her to another team, who sent her to another team. She's currently being passed around like a spliff at uni housing. But here's the kicker. She's being passed off due to her nuisance behavior. That's a given. But also because Public Service 2 can't authorize the uplift in her fees. She filled in her business address incorrectly back in January when we began commissioning with her. We have one address, Public Service 2 have another, meaning that Public Service 2 systems have flagged it as a discrepancy. And she's so busy demanding her money that she isn't responding to the urgent emails that Public Service 2 team have been sending out. There does not seem to be an end in sight. Absolutely astounding, no notes, 10 out of 10. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called 6854 Wiggles. It says, "Smacking naughty bottoms should be approved in the HR Standard Operating Procedures Manual. More would get done." Another commenter down below called Angry Cod said, "I appreciate your apology, but since you tempered it with a warning, then let me go ahead and warn you right back. I'm not putting up with your department's BS. Find some other toady to order around." So the finance manager told OP to do something. OP wanted to make sure they were absolutely sure they knew what they were doing and asked them such. OP even clarified that they could do anything they wanted, and the finance manager agreed. So this isn't on OP at all. This is completely on that finance manager. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. Don't throw rank on a tournament against high schoolers, you might get malicious compliance. Picture this, high school, computer education class. Computer education class consisted, for 3 years, 13 to 15-year-old in Sinclair Spectrum computers running logo software for programming. Then school finally upgrades hardware. We get 486 PCs with DOS, Windows 3.1, and color monitors. A whole new world for kids 16 and 17 years old. Professor is early 30s, very serious about his craft. Cool guy once you get to know him. Aide, former student, thinks that he's the bee's knees and everyone should adore him. He's just somebody that likes to micro-bully people, but harmless because he has no real power. All power comes from Professor. Class is being taught on a long and narrow rectangular room. Only windows are to a large patio, no windows to the hall. Around 12 to 14 computers, each with its own desk, 2 kids per computer. The first desk on one end of the room, near the door, being the teacher's computer. Kids being kids, we bootleg copies of video games to play on the farthest side computers, since computers are really expensive and you're really lucky if you have one that good at home. Mostly football, soccer games. We sometimes get caught, sometimes get sent out of class for the day and given a speech, but that's it, since my class is comprised of above average students. So the day before last, Professor says, guys, since pretty much all of you have passed, tomorrow, last day of class, we're having a striker. Soccer game, 6-minute games, very fast-paced, popular back in the day, tournament. Aide and myself will compete, and all of you will as well. Bring chips, bring something to drink, non-alcoholic of course, and may the best player win. The tournament starts. Semifinals end up being me against Aide and one friend against Professor. Before the games, both Aide and Professor approach us very seriously and tell us, may the best player win, but if you beat us, we might fail you. Me and my friend laughed. They don't. I'm not about calling his bluff and risking problems. I chose Trinidad and Tobago, very bad team. Aide chooses Brazil, best team on the game. My friend goes with some mid-team I don't remember. Professor chooses Argentina, very good team. All the other students, already out of the tournament, gather around the remaining 2 computers to watch the games. Halftime, Aide is beating me 3-0. Professor is beating my friend 4-0. Aide says, with a satisfaction smirk on his face, come on guys, we're bluffing. Do your best to beat us. This is not entertaining anymore. But he does not know one thing. 4 of us spend around 2 to 3 hours, 3 to 4 times a week playing the game. We know every single trick, everything there is to know about the game. They're beating us because we're afraid they might pull rank. I say to Aide, but you won't fail us, right? No, do your absolute best. I look at my friend, he smirks maliciously. I smile. We say, okay, and proceed to comply. Big time. The games end 3-11 and 4-12. Aide almost breaks the keyboard. The rest of the students are going nuts. Professor takes it like a champ. My friend beats me in the finals. Nobody cares anymore. To this day, I still don't know how nobody came to the room to say something about the noise. It was a perfect way to end high school. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Red Black Tree. It says, I used to be really good at fighting games. Old school, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, etc. I made the mistake of challenging my 11-year-old nephew in one of the latest Street Fighters. That was embarrassing. I won a single round because his mom distracted him for a second. I was good when I was young, fast, and practiced for hours. There's nothing like reading a story where people refer to 486 PCs and DOS and Windows 3.1 and the transition to color monitors to make you realize just how old you are because you remember all of those. Oh my gosh, get off my lawn. Some of my fondest memories from being in school were being in the computer lab and programming things in BASIC. Yeah, I wasn't very interesting. This story comes to us from Exotic Chemist 7624. You have to pick me up. For context, my brother is an inconsiderate douche canoe. It was either Saturday or Sunday, and I had the day off. I'm chilling at home, about to cook up something for dinner or late lunch, when I get a phone call, 4:30 p.m. My brother called me and expected me to jump up and go pick him up from his job because none of the family were available on a busy weekend for them. When I say he expected, I mean he called me up and said the exact words, "You have to pick me up." This was before he had his own car and license, around 18. His job was on the other side of town, a full 30 to 40 minute drive or more depending on traffic, and it was at 4:30 p.m., just before hectic work traffic at 5 p.m. If I had refused to get him, he would have called either of our parents and whined until I was bitched at to go pick him up. Understanding the box I had been put in, a Grinch-like smile grew across my face as I made up my mind. What did I do? I picked him up and then made 3 stops along the way home. 3 long stops. The first was at a gas station. I had been low on gas and he couldn't complain because I was his only ride. At the second stop, I pulled in at a restaurant to eat inside, Tijuana Flats. The whole time, he is complaining that I should take it to go and that we were only 15 minutes from home. The whole time, he's whining about me wasting time and that he had to do homework. That homework took like 10 minutes and then he just passed out with his TV and Xbox on. Eventually, he even called Grandma to complain. So much so, she called me to ask if I had offered to buy him any food while there. I did. Then told him tough he wanted to get the ride, and he got it. And finally, at stop 3, a supermarket 4 miles from home, I needed a few groceries. Around 6:15 to 6:20 p.m., when we finally got home, he complained like a little bee to our parents, Grandma and Dad. But when my dad got home from work, he just laughed, gave me a high five, and was like, "Why didn't I ever think of that?" And I was like, "Hey, maybe next time, I'll come along so we can make a few extra stops." OP added a quick PS on the bottom. It says, he had been doing the "you have to give me a ride" thing without a please in sight for a while now, and it was starting to get on everyone's nerves. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called DudeLoveAll2814. It says, "This is the best response to demanding family. You want a ride? This is the one you're getting." So I want to look at something really quickly here because it sounds like both OP and the brother still live at home. The brother is out working their job on the other side of town and doesn't have a car, but they do have a job. So why not take a cab home? OP, when your brother called, you should have said to him, "Okay, take a cab home." And if he said he didn't want to and you had to pick him up, I'd say, "Okay, but I'm going to charge you the exact same that it would cost you for a taxi." This story comes to us from OKP3414. You are not to take the company phone and hardware wherever you go. Sure, okay. End up spending $6,000 to get those to me in an emergency. Previous job, worked in a company that was regulated by multiple powerful government agencies. When they ask for something, they want it pronto, and if the delay was too long, they'd rather have us shut down business rather than wait for data, information, or prototypes. I was given a company phone that I had to take everywhere with me, rotating on-call periods, but I'm expected to be available if crap hits the fan. The phone was a special kind of phone from a fruit company based in California. It wasn't a US-based model. It had 2 different networks, and with some extra tech in it, could jump on whichever was stronger, and maybe even use both at the same time. I'm not sure, but it was good. Needless to say, it should have been pretty expensive. Now, I love nature. I can and have gone camping, oftentimes in remote places, and gone a few days without seeing another human. 18 months into the job, there was a new schedule where I got 3 days of being on call and expected to work a regular 8-hour day, having to live within 20 minutes of work. and then 4 days of being off. This worked pretty amazing for me. As soon as next on-call team doing maintenance, the same work from our department got on, I'd be off on a plane to get another national park under my belt or some remote state park, or whatever I had my sights on. I thought it'd be helpful to carry the company phone I was given along with me in case I was needed. In the year and a half, I was never contacted when not being on call, as we had a strong culture of communications, and the teams knew what they had to know in order to troubleshoot. But nevertheless, I took the company phone along with me. During the trip, the screen got damaged. Not so much that the phone was inoperable, but definitely difficult to use. Got back, went through the forums, and got IT to repair or give me another one. Some manager high up in IT went off and was going on and on and on about how expensive those devices were, how difficult it was to configure them, and how much harder it was to get them in the US, and all the other BS. Then she told me I am not to take the company phone and hardware along with me wherever I go. It is supposed to go between my residence and the office and nowhere else. And she was pretty derogatory about it, even throwing a few large chunks of racism in between. I shot off an email later, keeping my manager in the loop and the department head about confirming what she said. Cue my malicious compliance. A few weeks later, I took my PTO. PTO policy was pretty good, and thus I took off for 3 weeks, and still had over 3 weeks remaining. I did not take any of the company hardware along with me, as per what was stated by some manager who was somewhere in the organizational chart in IT and decently high up. All hands on deck situation arose. My manager was pissed at me not being able to answer the company phone. Wasn't like I was in the woods at my very dear cousin who just had twins and a very difficult delivery. I took care of my cousin while her husband looked after the kids. Manager had to get me on my own phone, and she had to go through some of my work friends for my personal phone, since I was pretty good at not giving out my personal contact info to people at work. Why aren't you answering the company phone? I'm not at home. I don't have my company phone with me. Never mind, get back online immediately. We have an all hands on deck situation. Sorry, I do not have any of the company hardware with me. Manager starts getting mouthy. Why? A bunch of expletives. This manager in IT said I wasn't to take company hardware along with me wherever I go. What? When did that happen? I sent an email stating what she said and kept you and our department head in CC. Manager goes through her email, finds it, and a bunch more expletives. You need to come back immediately. Sorry, no can do. My cousin's still pretty much half dead with a very difficult twin pregnancy. I'm taking care of her, and I was pretty clear about it before going on PTO. I wouldn't be able to come back. Manager cuts off call, calls me back in 30. Do you have anyone who has keys to your apartment? Yes. Give me their contact. I'm gonna get the computer and a screen and UVW shipped to you before night and you can get back. We have a serious situation. Can I get more PTO then to compensate for this intrusion? Me, knowing I have the slightly upper hand and striking while the metal's hot. Sure, I'll send an email approving this. By 8 p.m., I get my company phone, computer, and other hardware shipped to me. I also get 2 emails. One email approving the extended PTO for this intrusion. Second email from my department head stating that the original company policy is still in effect. In fact, a new policy has been put in place for some employees to have their company hardware with them, even on PTO. Anything else said by anyone else was to be disregarded. And cherry on top, that IT manager was in the CC. When I returned from my PTO, that IT manager was nowhere to be seen. Turns out, she had been demoted. She couldn't digest that and quit. The company had to spend over $6,000 to ship it on the same day and get the hardware to me. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says edit. As so many people have been pointing out, it wasn't a win for me. Don't be contacting during time off. Now you gotta carry phone and laptop, risk management of the company, and so on. First, I probably wasn't needed. As I said, we had a good communications culture, so alternate teams were aware, and it wasn't like I was the only one who'd be able to do it. But in case regulators asked for a third thing while people were already working on things 1 and 2, it'd be nice to have more people around who would be taking over. If the regulator was pissed off enough come the deadline, they would literally stop the business, and they could. Second, the employer was pretty good about not contacting people being off or on PTO. And if someone was contacted, they were given more time off or more days for PTO. People were happy, a few were grumpy maybe, but it was reasonable. Third, yes, some people may or may not see this as a win, and I get your point. Then again, this is not Europe. The downside? This industry is literally 5 times in US versus in Europe. Fourth, people in management were understanding, since I was available but away. I would be utilized only if the ones already working were overloaded, but they wanted me available. Thankfully, I really wasn't utilized. Fifth, destroying someone's career? I didn't do that. They did it to themselves. She was pretty high up in the IT chain, and I agreed to follow what she said. Consequences: IT doesn't have a business overview, but a small horse-like view of business through the lens of IT. She should probably have consulted a few more folks instead of being in a rage fit and throwing a tantrum. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called the Prophet Enoch. It says, people are expected to be on call when they're using PTO? A commenter called Grey Wolf AU responded to this one and said, yeah, F that. If I'm off and at a family situation at that, then they know where they can stick that conversation. Okay, a few things jumped out to me here. Number one, some of OP's work friends gave away OP's personal phone number. Excuse me? Were they worried for their jobs or something, and they figured they had to give out that personal information? Those friends would get a stern talking to if that were me, and maybe more than that. Then we need to touch on the fact that the boss was asking if somebody had keys to OP's place so that they could go and get the equipment and send it to OP. Wait, what? Were they actually asking to go into OP's personal home and get that equipment to mail it out, and OP agreed? That's how I understood it. If you're listening on YouTube, comment down below and let me know how you understood that section. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. CEO wants return to office, CTO plays it perfect. I work for a Spanish company. It's been like 7 to 8 years and we know each other pretty well. I've known and worked with the CTO for like 10 years now. He's a cool guy that wants stuff done. Even before 2020, the work from home policy was extremely relaxed. You do you, and have things done by the time we need it, we're okay. So when the pandemic came, the transition was as easy as it could get. In fact, as a company, and especially on the tech team, we embraced the opportunity and started hiring people from outside the city for a cheaper salary than in the city. But for the people, a higher salary than the one they could get without moving into the city. I even moved out of the city during that time. Since CTO didn't want to be a sales guy, the company hired a CEO in 2021, an Englishman that came highly recommended and was stationed in his rural house in the English countryside. Looked like a cool, relaxed guy for a while. Once the pandemic ended, he started pushing rather heavily for a return to office for everyone. He made polls, lengthy emails to everyone about how this fostered relationships and whatnot. He got really pushy, even complaining to CTO about it. So every time he came to Spain, people that lived around the city would go to the office just to be there so CEO was happy. And then, one time, CTO decided that he had had enough about the whole return to office mandate and CEO complaining. So, on a random meeting of the tech team, CTO said, okay, next Tuesday, I want everyone in the office. If you live far away, book a train, drive, whatever you have to do, I'll pay, but be here. And so we did. That Tuesday, every single one of the tech team, including people that took a 2 or 3 hour trip to get there, was in the office. Guess who wasn't there? Yeah, the CEO. So CTO took a picture, emailed it to CEO, saying something along the lines of, "If you can't lead by example, don't push my people to do things that don't work." And we went to have a relaxing lunch and beers type of day. Aftermath: return to office mandate never came to fruition. CEO was out of the company a year later. We closed the office since everyone works 100% of the time from home. And to his dismay, CTO is now CTO and acting CEO, and things are going smoothly. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Rancid Horse. Yeah, that's not appropriate. It says, the CTO was already the CEO, he was just in denial. A user called Klingon Bloodwine replied to this and said, in my experience, some of the best bosses and managers are the ones who wanted it the least. They have the skills needed to do the job, but lack the crappy micromanaging attitude. Yep, love this one. CEO is sitting at home while he wants everybody else to be in the office and working from there. There's something to be said for leading by example, and if your example is that you're going to stay at home, then your employees should be allowed to work from home as well. This story comes to us from Colonel Baby. I don't know how to fill your cup up all the way. Okay. For many years, I was the opening server or bartender for the weekend breakfast at a country club in a gated community for active adults. Technically, it was 65 and up, although up to 10% of the population could be 55 to 64. However, that was never an issue. I would say most were 70 and up. I've never minded customers who were picky and complicated as long as they weren't jerks. I've learned how to put up with a lot. My goal was to give everyone exactly what they wanted as efficiently as possible. And since the majority of the clientele were regulars, it became fairly easy to remember everyone's particulars. I had a regular in his mid to late 70s who was a crankly old thing, but harmless. His ribbing was easy to ignore for the most part. I knew what he wanted, got it out, got my tip, and carried on. Heck, sometimes we even got along. He was either by himself, with a friend from outside the community, with his 2 sons, or the whole lot of them. Despite being a brunette, he always called me, and most other women working, Blondie. Our universal name, apparently. Hey Blondie, get me a top off. Hey Blondie, I need some more ketchup. And he was just generally pessimistic, like someone had pissed in his Cheerios. His sons always gave me apologetic looks. I would shrug or laugh something off, and they'd tip me a bit extra. He would tap his coffee cup if he needed a refill. Hey, I don't mind. Don't need to get in a whole conversation. I get in, get out, and on to checking the next table. I would always fill a cup to about 3/4 inch from the top. Seemed reasonable, and no one had ever complained. These aren't large cups, but it was enough room to add cream or sugar, or to just not spill on yourself. After a year or two, that was no longer acceptable. He randomly started making comments about how I, or others, didn't know how to fill a cup up. I would usually smile, joke, and add a bit more. But one morning, it was slammed. I was bartending with a fairly full bar, taking to-go orders on the phone, getting the golfers food or drinks after their first 9, and had 2 4-tops in addition to that. Of course, he wanted my section. It was busy, but I was sailing. Getting to work at 6:30 a.m. didn't always have me in the best mood, but one musters through. Fake it till you make it. But all 4 of them were there, and he had an audience to whom he could show off his condescending comments. His mighty prowess cutting down a 25-year-old woman and putting her in her place. He had already complained about my inability to pour a proper cup of coffee. I was going to greet a table when all of a sudden he says, "Hey Blondie," and taps on his cup. So, with a crap-eating grin, I filled it to the very tip top, not even a drop spilling out. His son's eyes grew large, he started to sputter, trying to ineloquently say that's not what he wanted. No, sir, I never know how to fill a cup. Wouldn't want to have that. He grumbled, of course, and his son's eyes finally started twinkling. They finished their food, paid, and left. He never did complain again about my inability to refill his coffee. My revenge was minor, but the satisfaction was sweet. Gotta get joy in that industry somewhere, right? Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called CaliGirlOG. It says, I wonder if he had some dementia. I've known some elderly people who were really nice, but became meaner and ruder as the dementia got worse. And one would say those exact words all the time. Don't you know how to? Even when everything was exactly how they liked it. OP responded to this one and said, I honestly considered that as I typed things out, and I certainly witnessed members who were having issues with that. It genuinely was on par for his personality though. He always had to find something to complain about. That being said, it's possible, you never know. It really is fun to mess around with somebody that's being an absolute jerk, just to the point where they behave themselves in the future, but that's a very fine line. OP in this story served up some malicious compliance that was good until the last drop. This story comes to us from FMintar1. So you think you know more than me? I, 34 male, had always been doing multimedia for my church for years and years. So displaying lyrics and creating PowerPoint slides are second nature to me. I was scheduled to take care of the multimedia this morning, so as usual, I came and created what's needed. I set up all of the lyrics, Bible verses, and the slides that were sent from the speaker before I went to the restroom. When I'm back, I saw the guy who usually plays the bass, Nate, but he wasn't on schedule today. He was having a conversation with another person behind the multimedia station. I went back to my station and started pre-displaying everything on the screen to make sure that I can read everything. So that's what I did before I noticed that Nate is looking at my station. 5 minutes before we start, Nate suddenly asked what I prepared. I showed him everything, the lyrics, the Bible verses, the slides, just to satisfy his curiosity. Side note, I don't really like Nate for several reasons. He believes in a lot of conspiracies people shared on social media, and when someone questioned him, he argued non-stop. Most of us just tried to avoid starting a conversation with him entirely, including me. Also, whenever he's scheduled to play bass, he tuned his amp volume quite high, higher than the other musical instruments that I can feel the vibration every time he plucks his bass, and the multimedia station is at the very back of the room. He's just super obnoxious. Apparently, his obnoxiousness is at a high rate today, because as soon as he saw the slides I prepared, he said that the font size is too small. He didn't say, it might be too small. No, he said, it's too small. I told him that it's fine, it's the regular font size we all use week after week, but he wouldn't drop it. By this time, the service started, but for some reason, he didn't go to find an empty seat in the audience. Rather, he sat on a stool behind my station, while repeatedly telling me that the font is too small. By this point, I was listening to his font mantra behind me while displaying the lyrics for the singers. After a couple minutes, I asked him if he's planning to sit with the audience, and I kid you not, this is his response. OP, your font is too small, you need to increase it. I can't believe it. He's so fixated on my slide's font size that he refused to leave me alone until I fulfill his wishes. By this point, even the pastor's wife asked him to please have a seat in the audience, in which he told her that it's better for him to sit there, because if he sat in the audience, he wouldn't be able to see anything. I had enough. Malicious Compliance initiated. While still controlling the displayed lyrics, I also edited the slides while he watched, so I'm multitasking. Mind you, the service has already begun, so I can't actually display the slides just to make sure. I increased the font so big that the slides look ridiculous. Before, there were only 10 slides, and one slide could contain 6 to 7 lines of 2 to 3 Bible verses with a translation section below it. Now, there is about 40 slides with 15 plus lines that contain only 6 words each. I can barely fit the translation part, and each slide could only contain 1 verse. It looked totally atrocious. After witnessing his destruction, he patted me on my back, gave me a thumbs up, and went to find an empty seat. I looked at the pastor's wife, and even she shook her head. During the sermon, it was extremely awkward. The speaker was having difficult time reading from the screen because he kept pausing after each line. I also have to switch the slides quicker than before because each only consisted of 1 verse, which interrupted the speaker's pace. After 10 minutes, the speaker gave up and just read from his own Bible, which most audiences follow suit. I witnessed many audiences pull up their Bible app from their phone and just read from there, even Nate. I texted Nate, "Why are you reading from your phone? I thought you wanted the font bigger so you can read from the screen." And in response, he turned and glared at me silently. After the service was finished, the speaker approached me and asked if everything was okay, because the slides didn't look like what I usually made. The pastor's wife approached us, was very apologetic, and explained everything. Then we looked for Nate, in which we couldn't find him in the crowd. I guess he was too embarrassed to admit his monstrosity. You know, there's another way to handle this one. OP could have just thrown their hands up, said to everybody there, "Okay, Nate will be handling the presentation from here on in," and just walk away. This is really a case of you have your job and I have mine. I'm not telling you how to play your bass guitar, so you cannot tell me how to do my slides. This story comes to us from GoNuts27. Can't carry over 1 PTO day? See you in February. I worked for a 24-hour news organization, so someone needs to be in the studio at all times. As a staff monkey, I had things like PTO and vacation time, which I usually didn't use too often, but we were allowed to carry over 5 unused days each year, as long as we used those days in the first quarter of the following year. However, the end of the year is in high demand for off time, because most people needed to burn unused vacation time they couldn't carry over. Management wisely makes sure everyone knows the policies and schedules of December well in advance so there aren't any last-minute issues around the holidays. Since I didn't use a lot of my PTO during the year due to built-up comp time and overtime, I generally used it the week between Christmas and New Year's, and took about 10 days off around then. One particular year, I had 6 days left, 1 extra day. But since I already took off the time between Christmas and New Year's already, there literally wasn't a day left for me to use as a day off, as no one was left to cover a shift if I were to take off. I went to the scheduler and management and asked for either a one-time exception to carry over the extra day, and I'd take it on January 2nd, extending off time by 1 day. No go. Or pay me 1 day's wages for the unused time, also a hard no-go. Here's the malicious compliance. Since I had so much built-up PTO due to working holidays or comp time for overtime work, I had a ton of other days banked. Combining my already booked holiday break with my 5 carryover days and the 10 new ones I got for the new year, plus some holidays that come in the early part of the year, I figured I was able to take enough time off that I would leave for my Christmas break on 12/24 and not return until the last week of February, nearly March. And since I did it with enough notice, they couldn't deny me. They now have to cover about 2 months of my shifts. The next day, I put my time off in the system and emailed the scheduler a note saying, "Have a great holiday, I will see you in March." The following day, I receive a call from the VP of the department asking me what they need to do. I said simple, "Let me carry over my extra day. I will use it on January 2nd. You have almost a month to cover 1 shift, and we're all good." I got the carryover day, and I used it. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Megger66. It says, "Why was there at first not enough notice to take January 2nd off? But then you were able to submit it as part of your 2 months. It's still the same length of time away." OP responded and said, "That was my point from the beginning. I would have used the extra carryover day for January 2nd. When they originally said I couldn't carry it over, my response was to use every other PTO and new day that was given after the new year started, to take off not only January 2nd, but then every day I could after then, which would have had me off until nearly March, as opposed to the one day, which is eventually what happened. I don't think the commenter understood that part of the story fully, because the way I understood it was, they weren't letting OP carry over that one extra day. It had nothing to do with being too soon to book off January 2nd. So OP decided that they would use all of the days that they could use in the new year to take that day off, plus a bunch of other ones as well. OP did mention in another comment down below that they were glad that they were able to carry over that day eventually and take January 2nd off, because they didn't want to use all of their PTO days and other available days that would make them not available for the rest of the year. This story comes to us from Malami2111. I think I did my first malicious compliance yesterday. Yesterday was a weird day and I was a tiny bit shaken. I'm not sure I did my first malicious compliance or not, so tell me if it wasn't. There's my company and there's the other company, and both cooperate once in a while. In my company, I'm one of two people who have a monthly ticket for trams and buses. The rest travels by cars. The other company is in the old city zone, where only cars with an official permit can travel and park. So if my boss needs any person to go there, it is my coworker or I. 2 days ago, he asked me, because I was around while the colleague was on lunch break. I was to deliver some documents. It is faster than hiring a courier, because a courier must take a package to a warehouse where it is registered and then it goes out. So it could take a whole day if a courier picks it up late. And if my colleague or I go to the other company, it's only 45 to 60 minutes. The way my boss explained, I was to go to the other company and they set a time interval of 3 to 3:30, so I was to leave around 2. Okay, all clear. My boss wrote an email when I was leaving, so they knew when I was to arrive. They confirmed all was set. I was there just after 3. I was to leave the package, no can do. Their lady manager was to check it and then notify my boss if some documents are missing. So where is she? I missed her. Whole 5 to 10 minutes. And I was to wait for her because not one person in the other company knows which documents were in the package. But it's all good. She'll be back in 15 minutes, not to worry. And don't tell your boss. That part was weird. So I grabbed my phone, wrote a message, something like, "There's a misunderstanding, sending email," then a detailed email with description, but not blaming the other company. There must be a misunderstanding because, and here I put what they told me. The timestamp was 3:03, so I was definitely not late. What was even more weird, my boss checked the reply from lady manager, she confirmed. Not an employee, the lady in person. So I sat there, grabbed a book on my phone, all perfectly fine. Some 30 minutes later, my boss asks if I delivered the documents. No lady manager around. I asked and they weren't allowed to call her. But there's no need to notify my boss. They were sure she'd be here any minute. So I wrote another text, "No lady manager around, sending email." Added detailed description, including their statement they weren't allowed, and kept waiting. Next 30 minutes, no lady boss. My boss called them, they pretty much repeated what they kept telling me. I added another email, "Boss, I listened to your conversation. They aren't happy, but I couldn't wait outside. They insisted I was not to wander around with the documents. Got, not a problem. Do what they suggest and notify me immediately." I kept waiting. They wanted to get me a mineral water. I declined, wrote to my boss, got an email back. Close to 4:40, the lady manager barges in. Why wasn't I earlier as they decided? I grab my phone, read the timestamp, read the email with set conditions. She went reddish purple, got the package, I can go. I'm sorry, I can't go. I was told repeatedly she was to check if the documents aren't missing. She insists, I write a text to my boss. She doesn't want to check documents, sending email. And I read the message. She was not happy, but at last decided to check the documents. I thanked her, waited for her to email my boss, and wrote another email immediately. Left only when my boss wrote back that she really confirmed all the documents were in the package. Later, she contacted the owner and blamed us. So it was my luck that I wrote all the emails so religiously, and when the owner called my boss all furious, it was easy to deliver copies. My boss asked me today to his office and let me read emails to and from the owner of the other company. There was a lawyer who explained that in normal circumstances, I wouldn't be allowed to read it, but the lady manager insisted we did something wrong, especially me. And as it was also about me, I was to read this even if I wasn't the recipient. They also asked me to print the emails directly from my email account and screenshots from my mobile, plus write a detailed note from all of this, including timestamps from my emails, which I did. I don't know what it was, a weird power play, a way to discredit the other company. I don't even know if it was a malicious compliance or not, sorry. I don't think my boss or the lawyer will tell me more. Possibly if they try to sue, but why should they? OP did the exact right thing here. If somebody tells you you don't need to write this down or not to tell anybody else about something, especially in the business world, when you're at a completely different company, write it down immediately. There's some nefarious crap going on here. We really need a subreddit for stories like this that's like r/cover your butt. This story comes to us from Sunburnt. Waste not, want not. I think this counts as malicious compliance, but honestly, the ending was positive for everyone involved, so take that as you will. I started working as a waitress in a dine-in pizza and pasta restaurant. The food was really overpriced for the quality, but they got away with it because it was the only place open late near the cinema. And also the portions were extremely oversized by Australian standards. But we didn't have many regular patrons, so people would be shocked by how big their plates of pasta were. And since nobody could finish it, it produced a ton of food waste. The first time I went to management to ask them if I could give a cardboard takeaway container to a dine-in customer, they told me sternly, well, it's okay this time since they asked for one, but don't hand them out unless the customer specifically requests it. They are really expensive. FYI, they were not really expensive, management were just stingy, and also generally among the meanest bosses I've had. And don't ask me why they were okay with the cost of food waste. I guess they felt it gave them a good image to give large serves. Anyway, I really hated to see all this waste each day, and it was clear that the customers did too. So, whenever I cleared a table with a large amount of food left, and the customers were looking regretful about it, I would say quietly, you know, we do have takeaway boxes available in case you would like to request one. Just let me know if you'd like to request one. Almost invariably, they would be grateful, like, oh, that would be amazing. I felt so bad wasting all that food. I didn't know we had the option to ask for a box. Thank you. I think realistically, the fallout was a positive one for the restaurant since some of these customers did indeed become regulars and didn't mind paying the exorbitant prices if it took care of their lunch the next day. However, the management did ask me what was up and why we were going through so many containers. I said, I don't know, people just keep requesting them all the time lately. I guess people are becoming much more conscious of food waste. The zero waste movement was actually taking off at the time, so I got away with nothing more than a raised eyebrow from the boss. I don't know if doggy bags aren't standard practice where OP's from, but if I go to a restaurant and they give me a ton of food and I don't eat it all, I'm definitely asking for a box to take it home. I paid for that food, you're not throwing it out, and I can have it for lunch tomorrow. This story comes to us from Compile Commit. Return to office to increase productivity? Backstory. I was recruited by an IT multinational corporation during COVID. My manager is extremely chill and an outstanding leader. My grandfather, manager's manager, is a stickler for rules. For the purpose of this post, I will address my manager as Sam and my grandfather as Murad. I work as infrastructure and configuration manager. Work passes through my gate first, and if I don't pass it, it doesn't go to the next team. I act as a choking point of sorts, and any dip in my productivity become several folds down the line. However, apart from Sam, management is blissfully unaware of this dependency. Story: when I joined, there was no office in my city. My joining was at a city over 1,100 miles away. All joining formalities were done online. Since then, I have never been to the office, except for a 2-week workshop for which I was flown in by the company. 3 months ago, a new office has opened up in my city with just 14 people. My official location was transferred here to show the minimum number 15 required to open an office as per bylaws. We are an IT multinational corporation that provides service to an automotive corporation. My work is completely remote, so I never need to go to the office. I also really enjoy work from home. The company started elective work from office last year and hybrid at the beginning of this year, but everything was mostly dependent on manager's approval. Sam is on site in a different country. He has never asked any team member to work from office. Murad, on the other hand, expects everyone to return to the office full time. Usually, we are protected from this by Sam. Recently, Sam has transferred to a different team in the same project, and a different guy is now managing our team. Sam remains as my manager, but I no longer get to collaborate with him on my work, which is a huge bummer. The new guy is new to the company and easily swayed by Murad. Murad is originally from my city and decides to come back to his city to oversee the new office. The first thing he decides is everyone in this city should work from office. The other 14 are not affected, as they were already working from office. They work with specialized hardware that is only available at the office. The only one affected is me. I try to tell him that this will reduce my productivity. He is not convinced. I discuss my situation with Sam. He sympathizes, but is not in a position to do something about it. Now, I am a tall guy with several orthopedic challenges. I need my workstation and chair of specific dimensions. At home, I have set it up over the last 3 years, but setting the same thing up at a new office is troublesome. However, I have been ordered to return to the office. Cue Malicious Compliance. On my first day at the office, 16-ish days ago, I talk to the building manager and present him with my workstation requirements. Each requirement mentions the corresponding OSHA violation if not adhered to. He tells me it will take 45 to 60 days to create and acquire my workstation up to the standards mentioned. I spend the next 2 weeks at the office relaxation zone, which has a chair on which I can be seated without hurting my back. However, it is not a work desk, so while I am at the office, I cannot work. Suddenly, everything is running really slow. Teams are sitting idly because work is stalled at my gate. There are bi-weekly deliveries across multiple milestones, about 6 to 12 deliveries every month. We missed 7 deliveries during that window. Murad is pissed, but has no idea why things are stalled. The new manager is also confused. This is escalated to the CEO, and he asks Sam to consult for his old project to see what went wrong. It takes Sam 30 minutes to realize that my gate is stalled. He asks me on Teams to join the call to discuss what's wrong. I am obviously not on my laptop. It takes a lot of back and forth, but eventually Murad himself gets out of his room and searches for me. However, the office relaxation zone is on a different floor. He cannot find me and decides to have a separate call the next day. He exits the call and catches me on my mobile. The conversation goes like this: "Where are you? I couldn't find you in our floor. Can you please come to my room?" Sure. I come to his room and tell him what the issue is. "Why didn't you tell me this 2 weeks ago?" I did. I told you making me come to the office will reduce my productivity. And the workstation issue is a building manager issue. It has nothing to do with you. Hence, I did not inform you. My manager knows about it. I had informed Sam when I joined the company. "Please work from home until your workstation is ready." Next day, which was last Friday, I am work from home. The call with Sam happens before lunch. CEO joins the call as well. Sam asks me why things are stalled at my gate. Before I say anything, Murad jumps in and says that it was a minor issue and that work will be cleared fast, but CEO wants to know what's what. So I present my case. Sam agrees with me when I mention my condition. He also mentions that this was specifically mentioned in his handover to the new manager when he left the team. I am then asked to leave the call and go back to my work. After lunch, there is another call among Murad, Sam, building manager, and me. Building manager informs us that it will cost the company $2,500 to set up my workstation. Since it is a non-standard workstation, it needs to be placed in its separate room. Room will be charged at $20,000 annually. It will take 30 days to get everything ready if we decide to go ahead. Murad tells me he will let me know what is decided by the coming Tuesday. It's Sunday today, and I decided to write this up after I received a call from Sam in the morning. Apparently, Murad is done working in his city and will go back next week. I can continue working from home. My workstation, chair, and separate room will be ready by the end of next month, and I am welcome to work from the office whenever I want. OP added a quick edit at the bottom that clarified a couple of things from the story. The first one says, grandfather. Manager's manager is called a grandfather in my culture. The hierarchy is described like in case of a family. Great-grandfather becomes grandfather's manager, and so on. We don't actually call them using these titles, but rather refer to them using the titles in conversation, or mails, or official documentation. For example, an official documentation about mobile bill reimbursements may say, mobile bills up to $50 is approved, any higher will require grandfather approval. Room charge. Since there are only 15 employees, we have office space rented in a building where several small-scale companies rent. An additional room is not in the contract and will have to be rented separately. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Monkeys Love Bananas. It says, Murad sounds like a bozo, but was he actually aware of your need for extensive Title I ADA compliant modifications required to accommodate your disability? Also, is it reasonable to equate coming to the office will reduce my productivity to I will be chillin' in the relaxation room all day for 2 months and not doing any of operationally critical work? I certainly hope you didn't put this part in writing. It has nothing to do with you, hence I did not inform you. Murad, being a colossal doofus, may have very well saved you and Sam additional scrutiny by the CEO. OP responded to this one and said, apart from my daily work, I am also involved with several other infrastructure-related work for several other projects, so Murad knows how valuable I am as a whole. So even though the way I talk sounds rude, he can't really take action against me. Okay, so I have to say that I was confused on this one until I got to the bottom where the grandfather thing was explained, because I was thinking this was all just a nepotism story, until we realized that grandfather wasn't actually their grandfather, it was just a name for the manager's manager. Here I am thinking that it's okay that OP's sitting around in the relaxation room doing absolutely jack squat, because his grandfather is running the company and just isn't going to care. Boy, was I wrong. This story comes to us from Compile Commit Again. Strictly work from office. Backstory. This happened almost 10 years ago. I was looking for a change from my first job. My first company had a great work from home policy, so I was looking for an opportunity with a similar work from home policy. Story. Back in 2014-15, I was looking for a job. 2 years had passed in my first job, and I was looking for a better opportunity. At the time, I was working as a Java developer at a company that is known as a telecom service provider. I was finding several opportunities, but none had a good work from home policy. And I had grown quite accustomed to the policy my first company had. This was years before COVID normalized work from home, and it was hard to find a good work from home policy at most companies. Eventually, I had to forego my requirements. I was about to join a company, and I asked the HR about work from home, and received the most strict response that I had received of all the companies before. It is a strictly work from office opportunity. The pay was really good, almost twice what I was making, so I tried my best to look at that bright side. I also ask HR to add this strictly work from office only in my contract. Thinking they have got the better of me, they oblige. This additional clause would later lead me to the malicious compliance in question. After joining and getting inducted into the project team, I found out that the team was short at least 4 people. Due to this, everyone was overworked, and people were working 60 to 70 hour weeks while getting no overtime. I was the only one with my area of expertise, and I was taken as a replacement of someone who was about to leave. Beginning of the second week, and there is a meeting where the domain lead comes up and congratulates the team regarding their latest success, explains how the project has made the company a hefty profit, and how we're going to get a pizza party soon. I realized right then and there the toxic culture the company has, where people overwork without additional pay or promotion or bonus when it makes the company money. I make sure to get a locker at the office and start leaving my laptop at the office locker at the end of the day. For the first 3 weeks, this poses no problem, as I am getting training, knowledge transfer. Once my training is completed and the person training me leaves, I get my first batch of work. The work volume will easily take 80 hours. That's 2 business weeks. I am given 6 days to complete it. I work at my normal pace. At the end of the 6th day, lead asks me for the delivery of my part, and I say that I am only 60% done and it will take me another 4 days to complete. Apparently, that's not going to cut it, and I am pulled into a meeting with the project manager. He wants to know what the problem is. I tell him, this requires 80 hours. I have done about 6 days of work, which is 48 hours. I need an additional 4 days. He says, and I quote, "Work at home. That's why you have a laptop that you can take home." Cue malicious compliance. I politely apologize and say that I am unable to do so, as my contract says that I am prohibited to work from home. Manager is not convinced. He schedules a new meeting the next day with me and HR to go through my contract. There it is, in black and white, working from office only, working from home not permitted. I mentioned that I had tried my best to get work from home before joining and was vehemently denied the opportunity to. Manager is at a loss of words. HR is also dumbfounded. Long story short, for the next 8 months, I worked at my normal pace. During end of year salary review discussion, I'm given the opportunity to work from home. I asked them to add an overtime clause that would pay me additional for every hour worked after 8 hours every day. They disagreed, and I disagreed to take work from home. Every other teammate refused work from home in their salary review and asked for overtime clauses as well. We stopped getting pizza parties. I completely agree with OP in this case. If you and your team are responsible for the company making a boatload of money, then there should be bonuses in place. You should get your pizza the profits. It really is only fair if you get your slice of the pie. If I were in OP situation here, I would be really crusty about this because I should have a bonus that has me rolling in dough. I just want some cheddar, but all I got was mozzarella. I'm gonna get oven roasted for all those puns. This story comes to us from Compile Commit again. Focus on the work at hand, right? You got it, boss. Backstory. Another story about Sam and Murad. My manager Sam is extremely chill and an outstanding leader. His manager Murad is a stickler for the rules. I work as an infrastructure and configuration manager. I also love automation and automate everyday tasks for myself, my team, and sometimes management as well. Most of management loves it. Murad is not a fan though. He wants me to focus on my own work, and he loves doing things manually. Story. This is from November 2022. My son had been ill for 2 weeks. He is on the mend, but requires constant monitoring to take his meds and fluids every hour. You cannot expect that discipline from a toddler. I have taken a leave for a week to focus on his recovery. In my absence, Sam has been handling most of my work. I check and reply to mails at the end of the day. I am not required to do this, and Sam asks me not to, but I do it anyway, just to get ahead of potential issues the project might face due to my absence. At the end of the week, a management meetup is scheduled. Now, only management, team managers, scrum masters, system architects is required for the call, but this type of management meetup is a potential goldmine for automation ideas, so I usually join in. In the previous 3 months, by joining this monthly meeting and taking automation ideas that came out of them, I had saved the project and management around 100 hours of cumulative work weekly. The meeting starts on Friday morning. It's a regional holiday for a lot of people, so most have joined from home. About 20 people have joined. I have joined as well from my home. My son is seated beside me, and I'm teaching him how to play chess. The meeting doesn't really take a lot of focus from me, so my son doesn't mind. He is actually fascinated by most of my work, even though he is too young to understand any of it. Most of my teammates and Sam knows my son, having interacted with him during several calls. Suddenly, Murad joins the call. He is usually never in this call, as he rarely gets along with the agenda or the way the call usually goes. The demeanor is usually pretty casual. People calling each other by names instead of official salutations. People talking in native languages sometimes. Murad, being everyone's boss and having a giant pole up his rear, commands a serious tone from every meeting he is in. However, on this very occasion, it seems he wants to join in on the casual camaraderie. He wants everyone to turn on their cameras. Everyone takes a minute and the screen starts to light up with everyone's video. It seems most have hastily put on a formal shirt. Sam chimes in, asking me to keep my camera off because it's not required. Murad cuts in. The conversation goes like this. OP, you can keep your camera off, it's not required. OP is here? Must be to take minutes. He can turn his camera on as well. Actually, I'm on leave today. I joined in case my input is needed for any automation. That's fine, but please turn on your camera. It would be good for everyone to see everyone else. I turn my camera on. Both my son and I and the chessboard between us is visible. I am using a wide-angle camera. My T reads, I work for money, for loyalty hire a dog. Murad's face was at its widest, and it came to rest after 6 seconds with a reduction rate of 1 millimeter per second. The rest of the conversation goes like this. OP, that T is not office appropriate. It is quite appropriate for home though, where I currently am. You also seem to be playing chess. I would suggest you take your work seriously. Please focus on the matter at hand. You are right, I should focus. Disconnect. In a call later, Sam said that while he explained to Murad that I was on leave, at that moment, in front of 20 other people, the sound of my disconnection felt surreal. It's 2024. My automations have saved the project around 430 hours, and the company 250 hours weekly. Murad never joins that call anymore. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called LukeWom5846. It says, love it, well played, and thanks for sharing. Not that you have to justify your contributions, but Big Stick Manager should just stay in his lane if he isn't running the meeting or actually contribute. Sounds like middle manager syndrome to me. Well, it sounds to me like Murad made a real blunder by trying to force a move when he was out of position. OP, your response was a brilliant counterplay, making it clear that you were not going to be checkmated by his rigid rules. Kudos to you for always being a few moves ahead and turning what could have been a stalemate into a decisive victory. Keep up the strategic play and remember to always make time to play chess with your little knight. This story comes to us from Chels0394. Follow the speed limit? If you say so. Back in my high school days, the school decided that the parking lot speed limit for cars would be 5 miles per hour. In theory, a good thing. Reduces the chance of collisions greatly, and any that happen should be very minor. Now, here's the thing. The number of people that followed that is exactly 0. Not the parents, not the teachers, not the students. We are a K-12 school, so it was mostly parents. Now, the administration, who has since been going on monthly power trips, didn't like that and decided to start handing out speeding tickets, written warnings that you would lose your parking pass and get an email home. So we, the 30 of 100 high schoolers who had cars, decided to play around with it. Now, normally, car line takes about 20 minutes between when we leave. We get out a few minutes early so our cars are out of the way. And when car line is mostly done, aside from a few stragglers, and that's with most cars going at about 10 to 15 miles per hour in the giant parking lot we had, which couldn't be used for parents to park, well, that's too short, we decided. So we complied in the most malicious way possible. Every high schooler with a car did less than 5 miles per hour through the parking lot. Normally, by the time the smaller kids got into their cars, we were gone. But not anymore. We were crawling through the parking lot at idle speed. What normally took 5 minutes to clear 30 cars now took 10. And it had consequences. The entire car line for the other 500 students was not also moving at idle speed. Car line started taking 30 minutes on a good day. To say parents were livid is an understatement. Complaints filled the Facebook page, and the sassier parents reminded everyone that we just followed rules set by the beloved admin, beloved everywhere but the high school. With only one way out, and us having to get out before parents because we were literally in the way, our change screwed up the entire car line. In fact, it got so bad that the school was told to fix it by the city or there would be consequences, since we started backing up a major road during rush hour. At the start of next year, the habit fell out since most of those 30 people had left, and we went back to going a safe but above the speed limit speed in the parking lot. It's been 2 years, not a thing has been said. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Fixer. It says, "There are people who lie awake at night worrying that somehow, somewhere, someone is getting away with something and decide that it must be stopped." Maliciously complying with rules that make no sense is a wonderful way of silently protesting. The school admin here obviously had safety in mind, but they didn't really consider the practicality of what they were doing. I also think they didn't consider who they were dealing with, because students are going to find a way around the rules. And if they can't find a way around the rules, they are going to use those rules against the people who made them. Well done to the students. This story comes to us from Ancient Educator 76. Tell me now. This one should be short and sweet. I teach during the school year and supplement my understandably crappy income with various jobs. Grocery cashier at your Arizona hometown grocer. Every day I encounter at least 10 customers who are less than pleasant, but we manage to get through the transaction unscathed. Today was a day like no other. My job is to make the customer's experience a pleasant one as they spend their money, putting food on my table. I don't take that for granted, I promise. I appreciate even the butthole customers, but this particular lady devoured every morsel of my patience. She started with an, "Oh, you are open," followed by a harshly yelled, "Don't bag any of my things." I acknowledged this statement, then shed her for her phone number for her savings card. She interrupted me before I could get anything in by saying, "I said don't bag them," when I clearly was just setting them aside. I started to ask her again when she interrupted the picosecond I spoke by saying, "You know what? Go ahead and bag them paper and plastic." Okay, fine, no problem. But man, I need to get this lady's number for her savings. What am I going to do? I decide to give some grace here. I ask her one more time with as much syrupy sweetness as a 47-year-old man can muster. "Ma'am, can I get your savings number?" Right then, she spat out at me, "What's my total?" I tried to tell her that without the savings card, she'd be paying $85 more than she originally intended. It was super clear that she was shopping for the digital sales because that's all she got. Bags of chips that somehow need to be bagged paper and plastic on sale for 60% off. Then Coke 12 packs that were buy 2 get 3 free. 4 iterations of them. But no, she wouldn't let me talk. She saw that I was done scanning and repeatedly and indignantly demanded for me to tell her the total. I didn't want to lie to her and say it was the price it should have been with the sale when it wasn't, but I didn't want to indicate to her that clearly the price was wrong. She said, "Tell me the total now." So, enter Malicious Compliance. I told her the total was $296.37, with that sweet intonation that the price was so good. I don't know if she was flustered because of how hot and heavy she was about, well, everything, but she went right along handing me 300s and I gave her change. I handed her the receipt, and as soon as her and her friend walked towards the exit, they started to scan the receipt slowly as they trotted out. She shook her fist at the sunset. I guarantee there will be an update to follow. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Fungus Vampire. It says, "I have customers like that. Then they'll have the audacity to ask after they pay, 'Can I put in my number?' No, you cannot. Get the F out of my store." Another commenter down below called McDuchess said, "Too bad there wasn't a give no F's old lady behind her. You know, the kind that will scold someone like her for being so rude to the cashier. 'Cause what is she going to do? Deck a 73-year-old? You just know this Karen of a customer is coming back, and they're gonna go right back to OP, and OP's going to have to deal with the situation, even though they tried to before, and they maliciously complied." This story comes to us from Undercover Union 145. Stay until it's done? Okay, I'm doing it by the book then, and getting an extra day off. I used to work as a supervisor in my last job, and was directly working with a union. Some of my managers really didn't want to deal with things when it came to workplace injuries, so I had to deal with most of them. If you have worked with a union before, this is a very long and time-consuming process. While important, very tedious. So that brings us to that one evening. I was on my second double in a row of 3, and very much ready to go home. As I wrapped up my area, my evening manager texted me to assist another supervisor with an injury. The supervisor was newer and needed to be taught. I informed them I was already there on a double and needed to come back in the morning. Was there anyone else, or could they help them? This manager, who was notorious for passing their work on others, he texted me no, and I had to stay until it was done. Okay, I have written documentation of a directive. Who am I to say no? Alright, well then, since I'm teaching, I'm going by the book. I opened up the union and company policy on workplace incidents and followed it step by step. By the time we got to the drug test portion, the local clinic we used was closed and we needed to call it in. This is important because if you don't use the local clinic, the out-of-area one takes 4+ hours to come out. While that was processing, I did a lengthy investigation with the union. I spent the entire night going by the book, taking pictures, and documenting everything I could. By the time I finished and the drug test finished, it was 7 a.m. and my shift started in 30 minutes. This is the time the morning manager came in. They are one of my favorites, and why I pick up mornings all the time. When she saw me and said, "Oh, you're in early," I said, "I never left." Her face dropped because they have a rule that while management, including supervisors, can work more than 16 hours, if they work more than 20 hours, they need a 24-hour reset. I wasn't in the union, but still hourly salaried, and got overtime over 8 hours in a day. So not only was I going to not be able to make my morning shift, I couldn't make my evening shift either. I was still going to be paid for both while being sent home. She asked me who told me to do this, and I showed her the message from the evening manager telling me to stay until it is finished. I went home and enjoyed my extra day off into the weekend. When I came back, I had an interview about the incident with the senior manager. After showing my messages, which the manager tried to delete but only did on his side, I was dismissed without any issues. The manager was written up by the senior manager, and they had to pay me my 2 regular shifts plus 24 hours of overtime. Needless to say, I stopped picking up after that, no matter how much they begged. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Lucas Pizzacello. It says, manager trying to hide his mistake was a double whammy by itself. Another commenter down below called Zumbo Prime said, ha, yet another example of a big shot waving his pecker around and thinking he's made an example. Except this time, the example is him. So you mean to tell me that this manager deleted all of the messages on their end, thinking that that would make it all disappear, but not realizing that OP would still have the messages? The upper management found out about this, and they only gave him a little slap on the wrist? I understand that the union is there to protect the workers, but sometimes managers like this need to be kicked to the curb. This story comes to us from Kilted Turtle. Can't carry over time to the next year? Okay, that works. I worked at a company that had a lot of people that had worked a long time there. It was pretty common for new chemistry or chemical engineering grads to come in as their first job after college. At 20 years, they got 6 weeks, 30 days of vacation. Some people liked to work and simply rolled vacation days into the next year. The max you could ever carry over was 45 days. At some point, some bean counter figured out that the 45 days were a liability to the company. If you were selling a chunk of a company off, and those people have 6 weeks of vacation, and another 9 weeks in the bank, that's 15 weeks of time that the new owner could be on the hook for. So they decided and put out a proclamation that there would be no carryover from one year to the next. Much unhappiness swept the company. Lots of people tried to plan how they were going to use it. One of the key people I worked with came up in October and said they're going on vacation, and how much they liked working with me, which was kind of odd. So I pressed a little on why this sounded like a forever goodbye and not a see you in a week. So I got told, under strict confidence, that they had found a new job. New job started in 2 weeks. They had enough vacation days to cover them to January 1st. And the next year's vacation and holidays covered the first 2 months of the following year. So they were done. I wished them well, and they were gone. But they were not as good as I am in keeping secrets. There were suddenly a number of key people, also with 6 weeks vacation and a large vacation bank, that were gone. Lots of unhappy people in HR. HR could not say no to the closeout vacations, since they had decreed the rollover freeze. But HR decreed, you must return to work to be able to collect the vacation in the next year. Turns out, most of the people got jobs in very cool companies. They all scheduled a vacation day so they could come back to work for a day. They came back en masse. Coworkers scheduled them all into meetings, so they had things to do on that day. It was mostly a party day with an all-day food fest. As an added bonus, senior management had indeed planned to split off a division, and the sale fell through because of all the people that had bailed out. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Andrew NZ on Reddit. It says, where I'm from, and I imagine a lot of other places in the world, vacation days are considered debt on the company balance sheet. They also have enough in the bank to be able to pay it all immediately at any point in time. Changing policy like that though, that's how you piss people off. A lot of managers think they can screw over the workers in the name of short-term profits, but then when everybody quits and the company collapses, they sit back and wonder what the heck just happened. That original policy though, of being able to carry over 45 days is just dumb, because you have people who have 6 weeks holidays plus an extra 45 that they can take pretty much any time they want. Way to screw over your own schedule. This story comes to us from Christian Moral. Want me to use my vacations? Fine. All these stories about vacations and or annual leave reminded me of something that happened to one of my workmates a few years ago. A new manager was hired for our team, and quickly he wanted to impose his way of doing things. Daily stand-up meetings, people having lunch at different times, etc. So he didn't start off well with most people in our team. Then he started going after people who had accumulated annual leave. Here in Australia, you get 20 days annual leave per year. I had none left, so no problem with me, but this friend of mine had been working there for nearly 8 years and never took a day off. He had months worth of annual leave. This manager wanted to make an example of him and ordered him to plan out vacations and or sell back to the company some of that time. Perfectly legal, but with tons of conditions. My friend didn't want to take any time off, but was being pressured constantly by our manager. Every day at our stand-up meetings, the first item would always be pending annual leave and would just fixate on my friend. One day, my friend just had enough of this guy and gave him two options. He told him he wanted to go for extended holidays back to his country and take it all at once, or sell the whole thing back to the company. The manager accepted the first option, only to come back next day after checking with his manager to say that wasn't possible, as he would have to go for nearly 6 months, and we had plenty of projects in the pipeline. He then said, "You'll have to sell the whole thing back to the company," only to come back the next day after checking with HR. One of the conditions says that you can only sell a maximum of 20 days. Cue malicious compliance. From that day onwards, every morning my friend started emailing our manager, copying HR, and the head of our department, asking him for an update on his annual leave arrangements, stating he had given him the options he was looking for and was waiting for his response. He would also bring it up and push for an answer every day at our stand-up meetings. He never got a reply from our manager, but weeks later got a reply from the head of our department indicating they will review other options and let him know. They never did. The following year, my friend had his first daughter and ended up taking extended leave then, 3 months. The pushy manager had already resigned as he never felt comfortable in the team and found another job somewhere else. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Captain Quick. It says, "With too much leave accumulated, one response could be, 'Hey boss, just to let you know, since management is complaining about the amount of leave I have, starting next week, I'll be on vacation every Friday and Monday until the leave hours are at a more reasonable amount. If the Monday is a federal holiday, I'll be out on Tuesday.'" OP responded to this one and said, he was given that option actually, but straight up refused. He got a little upset on how this manager was handling things and wasn't too cooperative. Okay, 8 years without any holidays? How is that any good for your mental health and your productivity? Also, why the heck is this company allowing them to roll forward that many days of holidays? That is just incredibly dumb. This story comes to us from HeavyAd9344. Teacher wouldn't listen, so the entire class complied, and he got fired. This happened in the early 2000s in my junior year of high school. The district had just built the 3rd high school in our city, and most of the teachers were new. The band director was one of those new hires. He was qualified for the job, but had 0 people skills, and was extremely abrasive towards students. He had previously taught university and could not wrap his head around the fact that high school students are not college-level music majors who live in practice rooms and write symphonies in their sleep. His normal behavior consisted of berating students for not knowing university-level curriculum, talking down to everyone about how he can't understand why they were so incompetent, and stopping rehearsals to go on long tangents about things that had nothing to do with music. Every day, at least 2 to 3 students would leave class in tears. We complained to the higher-ups, and they repeatedly brushed us off. He made students hate attending his music classes, and many dropped band and orchestra as a result. One of the classes he taught was supposed to be Intro to Music Theory. For those who don't know music, this would be a class that should typically teach things like different types of chords, the definition of music symbols, the logic behind key changes, etc. At the first class of the year, there were about 25 kids enrolled. Most of these were music and drama kids who wanted to be teachers or performers in the arts one day. On the first day, he handed us a quiz because he wanted to see how much we knew. I think there were maybe 3 to 5 kids who were able to attempt a single question on the quiz. Not one got a single answer right. That's how advanced it was. Imagine signing up for what you think is a basic pre-algebra class and walking into advanced calculus. This teacher spent the entire class period berating us for not being prepared when no one could even attempt his quiz. We told him this is an intro class, none of us have learned anything like this before. And his response was, "Really? I thought this was an advanced class." The next class period, there were maybe 15 kids enrolled. He did the same thing, asked us to perform something we can't even understand, and then berated us for not being prepared. At every class, he would say, "I thought you all were musicians. This is supposed to be an advanced class." By the end of the second week, there were 6 students left enrolled in this class, including myself. He softened up slightly to those of us who stayed, and seemed to think we were his prize students, and that this was his class of elites. Think Professor Slughorn from Harry Potter. In truth, we all thought he was insane and cruel, but the 6 of us had sufficient music background and experience to understand a fraction of his lessons. Without the bell curve, we all would have failed his class. A few months go by, and we are at the end of the first semester. By now, every student connected to music in the school hated this guy, and repeated complaints had done nothing to fix the problem. The admins filed away every complaint, but never did anything more than remind him that he's supposed to be more kind to students. He changes nothing, and still berates students and makes them cry. So when it comes to the final exam for his theory class, he decides that he wants to give it to us early so that on the day the final is supposed to be scheduled, we can have a class party instead. Of the 6 of us left, 4 of us have the same period after his class together as well. That class was AP English, and we were prepping for the AP test. We had no problem with a class party and music right before the AP prep exam, so we didn't complain. The day comes of our music final exam, and after we finish the test, he tells us that for our class party, he wants to take us all to breakfast at a new IHOP that opened 20 minutes away. His class was first period. We try to tell him all the issues with this plan. We aren't allowed to leave campus without permission slips. It was a closed campus policy due to an incident where a student who left campus for lunch got hit by a car and was unalived. We will not get back in time for second period, which was a final exam. He doesn't have permission to remove us from the campus. What if there's an emergency and we are unaccounted for because we aren't even at the school? His solution was to tell us that after the start of class on our final class day, he would be going to IHOP, and if we wanted to join him, that was our choice. But if we didn't, we would have to stay in the classroom and not bring attention to the fact that there was no class and no teacher. Without talking about it to each other, the 6 of us saw an opportunity to finally get the admin's attention to the complete disregard this teacher had for rules and policies. We made sure to inform our English teacher that we might be late to class on the day of the final due to a class field trip for music theory. She was irritated and reminded us that this final was very important and that she would not give us extra time if we came in late. We told her that we understood and gave her details about where we would be and what we would be doing and who we would be with. She said she still expected us to be in her class. On the day of the final, we all went to IHOP. It took forever to get there because of construction and forever to get our food because the restaurant was newly opened and had a large number of customers. We got back to the school halfway through our second period class. The admins were waiting for us. Security was waiting for us. My English teacher had called the front office to complain that 4 of her best students were missing and that she was fairly certain we weren't even on campus. The admins had checked attendance and seen that we were all marked present that morning, and they had searched the entire school looking for our class. The 4 of us walked into our English final to a livid teacher. We knew she was pissed at us, but couldn't punish us beyond saying we had the same remaining time as the rest of the class, since we had been with a teacher in our absence. None of us did as well in the final as we could have if we had the full 87 minutes, but we were doing well enough in the class already that the lesser marks didn't affect our overall grade too much. The band teacher had a private reprimand that was so loud the entire school could hear it. He was confused as to why the administration was upset that he took minor children off campus without permission or notice, without proper school transportation, or even a good reason. He stayed with his usual attitude, but this time toward the admins. Why are you guys so incompetent about this? They're old enough to drive, what's the problem? The English teacher, who I actually adore and was one of the best teachers I've ever had, absolutely went mama bear on the administration about how could they continue to employ someone who disrespects the other teachers so much as to deprive his students of their final exams and put them in potentially dangerous circumstances. He told us to drive ourselves to the restaurant, and any accidents or medical issues would have been the school's fault. He was fired later that day. Many of the students had a gleeful but confused reaction since the 6 of us weren't talking to anyone about it. All most people knew was that this tyrant of a teacher was gone. We didn't spread the story very much of how it happened because we still feared being reprimanded for our involvement, since he technically gave us a choice to go with him or stay. But I always smiled when people gossiped about what the final straw was that got him fired. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called EHP42. It says, I think there's an issue where some teachers decide that their education level determines the baseline of their teaching, or they teach at the level they wish they could and not the actual level of the course, which is truly insane. One of the best teachers I ever had was my physics teacher. He had a PhD and spent summers doing research at CERN, but he knew how to teach the material at our level. He also tied in the most cutting-edge advances in the field, which he explained at our level. I think in OP's case, some people just aren't meant to be teachers. Okay, granted we don't know all the details, but one thing I was thinking during this story is, this guy is qualified to teach at a university level, but he's teaching in a high school. Why is that? Do you think he might have gotten fired from the college? Maybe he was so bitter that he wasn't able to teach at the college level anymore that he just figured he'd keep doing it anyway, regardless of what he was supposed to be doing. Those of you reading along on YouTube, let me know what you think on this story by commenting down below. This story comes to us from Wooden Ladder 5851. Finance department at work held firm on max per day for meals while traveling. They messed up with and denied me reimbursement for $30. Ended up costing them $750. Many years ago, during a corporate merger, I was responsible for transitioning a portion of business operations to a distant city. I was there for 4 weeks in an extended stay suite hotel with fridge and microwave. I had a meal allowance of $50 a day and was required to submit a weekly expense report with receipts for reimbursement. After a long day, all I wanted was to get comfy, chill out, and fix something in the room to eat. On day 1, I shopped at the local market spending $80, and day 4, $20. I submitted my weekly receipts for a total of $100 and was told I had exceeded the daily limit and my reimbursement would be $70 versus $100. Finance insisted that $50 a day in receipts is max they would pay, even as I pointed out that the total was less than a third of what I could have submitted. They stood firm and refused to budge from the daily max. At the time, my most favorite coffee beans were only available for purchase in coffee shops located in select areas of the country. As luck would have it, there was one close by. The name included cafe, as they also sold sandwiches, etc., and the receipt was not itemized. Yep, you guessed it, the last 3 weeks, I bought bags of coffee beans every single day. In their effort to short me $30, it ended costing them $750. Classic example of a company being penny wise and pound foolish, and jerking employees around. In spite of incredibly attractive financial offers to relocate and remain with the company, I resigned once the transition was complete. Shortly thereafter, I ended up in my dream job for the next 25 years. My position was a new one and just beginning to emerge within the industry. As such, I had tremendous leeway in defining the role and budget. I was respected, my work was valued, and my professionalism and judgment were trusted. I've always been that way. You want to question and nickel and dime me over nonsense? I will respond likewise. If I receive respect and trust, I will have your back and will darn near hurt myself delivering the best I have to offer. I'll adjust my schedule, burn the midnight oil, whatever it takes. All because I know that once we get through it, I'll take some time for myself, and no one will question my schedule or work ethic. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called ShadowDragon8685. It says, there was a time when a per diem was, you're going to be gone for 2 weeks? Okay. Your per diem is $50 a day. Here's $700 cash. If you eat cheap, you can pocket the rest. If you blow through it by day 3, you're gonna have to figure something out. Good luck. There's not much more to say on this one besides I completely agree with what OP did, and I would have spent right up to my maximum every single day going forward on every trip they ever sent me on. The bean counters at that company really like to micromanage, and it's just a horrible way of doing things. This story comes to us from Chocolate Bourbon. Bitch at me about per diem receipts, and I don't need receipts for under $25? Challenge accepted. The previous post made me remember my time at a company about 15 years ago. Per diem food was $15 for breakfast, $25 for lunch, $50 for dinner. We were told to buy the food with your company card and submit photos of the receipts using your phone. One day, I spent $35 on dinner, and the photo of the receipt was a little fuzzy. By the time I noticed it, when I went through the photos and assigned them to meals, I had lost the paper copy. So I got reprimanded by our VP. All photos must be clear and easy to read. He also confirmed that meals under $25 didn't need receipts. Alrighty. Before I got that email, I had thought over our per diem policy and its potential loopholes. That was the day I decided to begin exploiting it. Challenge accepted, and malicious compliance begins. I have very simple tastes. Give me a flip-top can of chili and a plastic spoon, and I'm fine. Plus, that way, I can just go back to the hotel and rest. I don't have to spend the time at a restaurant or hit a drive-thru on the way back. So about $10 a day is plenty. But the company was offering $90 and receipts were only required for transactions over $25. So the first day of travel, I'd go to Walmart or Costco and get my food for the week. I'd do 3 separate transactions, one for $15, one for $25, and another for $25. That took care of my food for the week. I always went as cheap as possible, since any extra money I spent on food was money I couldn't spend on something else. Then I'd spend the rest of my travel days buying whatever I wanted, never spending more than $25 per transaction. Costco and Walmart were ideal. They offered cheap food I liked, and also all sorts of other things. I knew I couldn't be greedy. If every day I came right up to the max of each meal per diem, but not over, and never submitted receipts, that would seem strange. So I'd ensure to bucket them into only 1 or 2 transactions per day. I did this for years, as long as each receipt added up to less than $25, and I only had 1 or 2 allocated to lunch and dinner. No one cared for a while. Then there was an outage for an airline where I had to stay an extra week on site. I had no clean clothes, so I went and bought some clothing at Walmart, more or less as I had done before. I had a new boss and new VP by then. My new boss noticed and freaked out. He and I spent hours on the phone together trying to slot each receipt into some acceptable category. It was hopeless though. It was impossible to disguise those Walmart purchases by mixing them in with all my other Walmart purchases. No matter how much canned chili you eat, it's still canned chili. So I sent in my expense report in all its Walmart glory. My boss made it sound like someone would roll up to my desk with a siren on their head, but nothing came of it. I laid low for a few months after that and ate some really nice expensive meals. Then my boss got transferred. I got a new boss who had no knowledge of this history, so I went back to my old ways. Over time, I bought kitchen towels, bath towels, water bottles, sippy cups for my kids, stuffed animals for my kids, books, tools, glasses, pants, shirts, jackets, a toaster, walkie-talkies for my kids, headphones, etc., etc. And I probably saved the company a couple $100 each trip. I always came for just under a week, so it was a win-win. Thank you for the large-ass old company, and you're welcome for my thriftiness. The money I saved you went right to the bottom line. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called JustSomeGuy56. It says, the whole point of per diem is so neither the employees or the company has to process a bunch of claims for meals. When I was traveling a lot, I always spent a lot less than the per diem, so I made money. But I guess there are companies that will happily spend $1 to make sure an employee isn't cheating them out of a dime. I would say that OP missed an opportunity here. They were just buying small things every day. If they wanted to get something bigger, they could have just loaded up on $25 gift cards. Then if they wanted to buy something like a big screen TV, they could just take in all those $25 gift cards and pay for it in one shot. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.